Arc 3 Slapping the Space Reincarnated Girl. Chapter 1. The male and female protagonists didn't even get to speak a word to each other, let alone get together. The second world was already completely out of the Lord God's control. After Zhou Yunsheng returned to his Shanghai space, he found that his soul power had become even more powerful than the last time. He was vaguely aware, as long as he disturbed the space, the power accumulated in the space could be absorbed by him. This way of sustaining life was a copy of the Lord God's. Perhaps one day, when his power grew beyond the Lord God's, he would be able to break free from this prison and return to reality. This speculation did not make Zhou Yunsheng feel excited. On the contrary, he very much enjoyed every instant of confrontation with the Lord God. As the energy absorbed was too large, he fell into a dormant state. When he woke up again, there were 2 new galaxies in the Shanghai space. Zhou Yunsheng stood in the galaxies for a long time, then pressed the transfer button. When he opened his eyes again, he was sitting in a simple small cubicle by himself. Placed in front of him was a small, long table. On it was a piece of white paper, a writing brush, and an inkstone. Was this ancient times? He pulled at his gorgeous brocade gown, then clicked on the AI on his wrist. There was a brief description of the world and detailed data on the original owner on the screen. He was in a tribute courtyard in Dazhou County. Now was the once every 3 years civil service examination. The original owner smoothly passed a series of examinations, including the prefectural exam, county exam, courtyard exam, and village exam. After breaking into the municipal exam, as long as he had successful pass, he could participate in the final palace exam. The original's name was Chen Yibin. He was the Ministry of Appointments, high official Chen Hui's eldest son. He was usually happy to partake, but not prepared to do any work in scholarly things. So this time he could only make it through all the difficulties and arrive at the municipal exam because of the support from this world's heroine's blessings. The heroine's name was Xie Yuro. She was the 7th Princess Zhou Ziqing concubine. Previously, she died in the cold palace, but was currently reborn. During rebirth, she gained a medicinal space and a spiritual spring that could cure all diseases and nourish beauty. Chen Yibin's older sister, Shen Qiaodan, was also the 7th princess concubine. In her past life, she and Xie Yuruo were rivals, but because she gave birth to the eldest son, she overpowered Xie Yuruo to become imperial concubine. After the 7th prince was enthroned, her child was established as crown prince, and she became the empress, mother of the world. As the loser, Xie Yuruo was demoted again and again, and ultimately died of illness in the cold palace. Before her death, she learned that her many years of infertility were Shen Qiaodan's masterpiece. It was reasonable to think that Xie Yuruo would hate the Shen family after rebirth. How could she secretly help Shen Yibin? Naturally, it was also a plot. Xie Yuruo knew future events. She sent someone to secretly reveal the exam questions to Shen Yibin and helped him get all the way from the prefectural exam to the municipal exam. At this year's municipal exams, a big fraud case would be exposed. A palace eunuch copied the Tiantian Emperor's handwritten exam questions and went outside the palace to sell it. The Crown Prince's followers secretly thought that this was a great opportunity to rake in money and join hands with them to wantonly receive bribes. The imperial exam candidates got the exam questions in advance. In order to ensure that they passed brilliantly, they naturally spent huge amounts of money to hire talented people to write their answers. After memorizing them, they entered the tribute courtyard to directly write from memory. So many remarkable answers would appear in this year's municipal exam, prompting the Tiantian Emperor's great joy. But rotten was rotten, and the number of people brimming with talent were very few. So if you ask for an essay, and I ask for an essay, inevitably repeated essays would appear. One by one, after picking out 7 or 8 identical papers, the Tianshan Emperor's joyful mood turned into rage. He ordered the Ministry of Appointments high official and the Supreme Courtyard to jointly investigate the matter. Within a year, all the candidates who bought the questions had their scholarly honor abolished and were sent back to their ancestral homes. Within Beijing, there were no shortage of noble children involved. Their fathers were all dismissed from their position by the Tianqian Emperor and blacklisted after investigation. For a time, there was a decline in factions. From this day, the Crown Prince also gradually began to lose prestige and became the seven princes opportunity to seize the heir to the throne status. In the last life, Shen Yibin didn't even take the Tong exam, so he naturally missed the municipal exam. But his father, Shen Hui, relied on his commendable service during the investigation to become the Tianshan's emperor's favorite minister, finally becoming prime minister, second only to the emperor. If not for Shen Hui's support, the seventh prince wouldn't have helped Chen Qiaodan become the formal imperial concubine. In this life, Xie Yudo secretly helped Chen Yibin successively pass the county exam, prefectural exam, courtyard exam, and village exam. Her goal was to let him participate in the municipal exam, then have his scholarly honor dismissed, simultaneously ruining Shen Hui's career. Without the Shen family's glory, Shen Qiaodan was not worth fearing. Zhou Yunsheng arrived not early, but not late. Unfortunately, Shen Yibin had already bought the exam questions and memorized answers. Zhou Yunsheng arrived as he was preparing to reply to the question. Now he had only 2 options. One was to give up the exam and leave early, but the Crown Prince's followers had a ledger, a record of all the imperial exam candidates who bought the questions. Even if he gave a blank exam paper, when the account books were exposed someday, he would still be as condemned as before. Second was to renounce the memorized essay and write an answer to startle heaven and earth and weep ghosts and gods. The Tianqian Emperor was eagerly seeking men of worth and ability. He already had 1,000 gold to buy horses' bones, and 10,000 gold to hire through talent. If the learned scholar was a genius, he would certainly be lenient. Just how remarkable does the essay need to be in order to impress him, thus escaping calamity? Zhou Yunsheng pondered and looked at the cover of the exam booklet. This topic was very simple, actually only 3 words: Zhou Yun Diao. It really was the Tianshan Emperor's simple, pragmatic, and sharp theming style. The so-called Zhou Yun Diao was the text system currently being implemented by Dazhou. It was based on the equal field system. Presently, due to land annexation intensifying day by day, a large number of self-employed farmers have gone bankrupt and fled, or have been reduced to tenant farmers under a landlord. The equal field system was gradually on the verge of collapsing. The foundation had collapsed, and the Zhuangdao system was in jeopardy. It not only exacerbated the common people's life burden, resulting in people becoming destitute, they also couldn't meet the tax quota required for the government to operate. Now the Tianqian emperor was endlessly worried about tax reform. Zhou Yunsheng was proficient in the four arts. Coupled with the AI's robust searching engine, a Yaguan Shuosong level of text could be written as naturally as breathing. He closed his eyes for only a moment, and when he reopened them, his brush moved as gracefully as a dragon. The atmosphere of his handwriting was majestic, profound, and powerful. Stunning, but the content of the essay was even more amazing. It not only elaborated on the shortcomings of Zhou Yundiao, but also suggested the even more advanced twice taxation system. The twice taxation system changed the practice of levying Zhou Yundiao taxes according to able-bodied men, implementing a taxing criterion based on the amount of property, by ensuring the principle of asset-based, not people-based. Not only would the state's fiscal revenue increase, the burden on the people would be lightened. It was the basis of the future generation's tax reform, and a major improvement in history. Past Chen Yibin's memorized essay was also very exciting, but it only slightly elaborated on the shortcomings of Zhou Yungyao. It was not at all in depth. Forget about giving an effective, realistic solution. Even so, the Tianqian emperor went through great pains to find out the true author of the essay, making an exception to let him participate in the palace exam, then handpicking him for top scorer in the palace examination. This man was later recruited by the seventh prince, then served as the seventh prince's capable assistant, together with Shen Hui. However, such magnificent poetry, which made the Tianqian emperor awestruck, was really not worth mentioning when compared to Zhou Yunsheng's writings. After putting down the writing brush, Zhou Yunsheng glanced around, then closed his eyes to recall Shen Yibin's life. In the end, Shen Yibin's scholarly honor was abolished. He was banned from ever participating in the imperial examinations, and his father Shen Hui was also relieved of his post. His excellent career destroyed in one day. The Shen family quickly declined. Shen Xiaodan struggled to make any progress in the seventh prince's household and died from sorrow. In contrast to the Shen family, Xie Yudo steadily rose to become Empress Dowager. Her younger brother feigned illness to avoid the municipal exam after her warning, and in the next municipal exam, he passed brilliantly, topping the list, finally reaching the highest official position. Chen Yibin loved to fool around, always seeking enjoyment. His greatest dream was only to be among the candidates who successfully passed the Imperial Civil Service examination, to let his father see him in a new light. How could he anticipate that he would get in, but his entire family would have to pay for it? Now, Zhou Yunxiang would not only help him avoid the crisis, perhaps he'll pull strongly against the crazy tide and make the Shan family glorious again. So what exactly should be done? Support the seventh prince's bid for the throne? Zhou Yunxiang slightly shook his head, rejecting this idea. Currently, Xie Yudong Duo had already become the seventh prince's favorite concubine, thanks to the space and spiritual spring. Plus, Shen Xiaodan was plotted against by her, resulting in her repeatedly making mistakes, provoking rejection and being sterilized by drugs. He was afraid that helping them would be futile. Rather than helping the seventh prince ascend the throne, giving Xiudo a big advantage free of charge, it was better to support another prince. The Tiantian emperor had 12 sons, but the crown prince, the son of the first wife and the eldest, was the most favored. However, due to being praised too highly in the past few years, the crown prince's behavior became increasingly reckless. After this fraud incident, the Tiantian emperor started losing patience with him. If the crown prince became stable, it wouldn't be difficult for him to gain the emperor's heart. Then where would the rest of the princes find the opportunities to snatch the throne? But he didn't know if the crown prince had the possibility of recovery. He'll go examine him later. If he wasn't any good, he'll find another prince. Thinking this way, Zhou Yinsheng unconsciously fell asleep, prompting the inspecting official to secretly shake his head. After the municipal exam, the examiners worked around the clock to grade the exams. Due to this topic being important to the country, the Tiantian emperor inevitably had the idea to pool wisdom for mutual benefit, while the candidates were taking the exam. Therefore, he went to the tribute courtyard to look over the grading in person. An examiner took out an exam paper, bowed and said, "Your Majesty, Emperor, please see, this scroll is worth a first place." This small official also has a fantastic exam paper. Another examiner offered one. The Tiantian emperor took them with only a rough glance over. He was full of praise. The examiners continued grading papers while he read, but suddenly one of them knocked over an inkstone, revealing a face full of horror. "What's wrong?" The Tiantian emperor slowly looked over. Reporting to the emperor, "This small official here actually has an exam paper that is indistinguishable from a previous one." The examiner's face was deathly pale. He knew that the situation meant that someone had leaked the exam questions and found someone to answer on their behalf, and this was done on a large scale. The Tiantian emperor's eyes darkened. He took the exam paper and hastily read it. After reading, his tone was unprecedentedly severe. Find all the identical papers and hand them to me." The examiners didn't dare neglect. They immediately buried themselves in the examination papers to search. Not long after, they dug out 8 or 9 identical answer sheets, but one person held one exam paper and stared foolishly for a long time, not willing to let go, his fingers trembling slightly. The Tiantian emperor saw this and walked over, still with a stormy, gloomy expression. But after reading 2 lines, he was stunned. Immediately after, his brow raised in joy, and finally he actually slapped the table in amazement, laughing heartily. "Excellent, excellent! I didn't expect my Dazhou actually had such a richly talented individual. Moreover, I actually encountered him. This is my blessing." Due to being too pleasantly surprised, the Tiantian emperor disregarded the rules and directly opened the seal covering the examinee's name. "Shen Yibin? Who is Shen Yibin?" It sounded somewhat familiar. Responding to the emperor, "Shen Yibin is official Shen Hui's eldest son." An examiner answered, then shook his head and sighed. This one was a well-known sloth in Beijing. If he could write such a beautiful essay, the rest of the scholars could collectively hang themselves. It must have also been written by a proxy. The Tiantian emperor's thought matched the examiner's. His face suddenly turned furious, saying in a heavy voice, "Arrest Shen Yibin. Be sure to investigate who gave him this answer." Chapter 2. Shen Yibin was the Shen family's only son of the first wife, so he was very pampered. His food and clothing were top class for the time period. After Zhou Yunsheng returned to the Shen residence, he really had a few days of leisure and happiness. How could he foresee that on this day, just as he got out of bed, he was placed in prison by the imperial guards? Shen's father was a minister near the Son of Heaven. He naturally had the opportunity to access the exam questions. The Tiantian emperor suspected that Shen's father also participated in the fraud case, so he ordered the imperial guards to detain him. Father and son were currently squatting in a stinky cell, already with black and blue eyes and shallow complexions. They looked very haggard. "When is mother going to send us dinner? I have not eaten a bao duck in a long time. I'm really itching for one." Zhou Yunsheng had a straw dangling from his mouth, rubbing his board-beaten buttocks. Fortunately, he had the habit of strengthening his body when he entered a new world, or he'd now have internal injuries from the beating. Shen's father had not been fired yet, so as an official appointed by the imperial court, his board beating wasn't as severe as his, but his heart's torment was 100 times more painful than being tortured. He grabbed his son's ear and angrily rebuked, "You, this unfilial son, you still think about eating at this time? Quickly confess out the person who answered your questions, lest you suffer any more torture." "That is my own writing. How can I confess?" Zhou Yunsheng covered his ears, looking wronged. Shen's father saw him still unrepentant, even in this situation, and couldn't help but feel short of breath and chest pain. Swinging his fists to give him a good beating. Meanwhile, Shen's mother was visiting her daughter, the 7th prince's concubine. "Go back, mother. I'm also now like a clay Bodhisattva, fording a river. I can't guarantee my own safety. Where do I have surplus power to save father and younger brother? I sent someone to invite the 7th prince a few times, but he was not willing to see me. Perhaps he foresaw my purpose for calling him, because he unexpectedly made Mother Imperial Concubine summon me to the place for a reprimand. Now I'm forbidden to set foot outside, and I don't know what month or year I will regain my freedom." Shen Dan said while shedding tears, her expression hopeless. Shen's mother suddenly understood. After a moment of silence, she said, "So the 7th prince intends to stand idly by? It makes sense. Your brother has no hope of getting out of this predicament in this lifetime, and your father's career is also ruined. Our Shen family is naturally useless to him. Daughter, you have no children and have fallen out of favor. What will you do in the future? If I knew this would happen, I would have betrothed you to an ordinary family, to give you a peaceful life." Mother and daughter felt sadness welling up, crying on each other's shoulders. West Side Courtyard, Xie Yudu sent someone to inquire about the conversation between the mother and daughter. She dismissed the servant girl who relayed the message and sneered. "The Shen family has fallen. What other ways out does Shen Dan have? The future hardships are just beginning. Please slowly enjoy it." A few loyal servant girls, all submissively standing respectfully, pretended that they didn't hear anything. Just at this time, the 7th prince stepped in. He saw the peerless beauty reclining on the couch, and his indifferent eyes immediately seeped out a small smile. "Xi Qing, Lady Shen came. You did not." Xie Yudo displayed a kind-hearted and gentle appearance in front of others at this time. She would naturally plead for lenience. "Don't say any more. Imperial father is now wrathful. No one can persuade him. I can only let the Shen family rely on themselves. The seventh prince's face instantly turned cold. He knew the principle of sending a charcoal in snowy weather, but Chen Yibin was a good-for-nothing, and the career of the only capable person in the Shen family, Shen Hui, was ruined. This Shen family really had no enticing value. Upon seeing this, Xie Yudo, also no longer persuaded, she raised her handkerchief to her lips and secretly laughed. Shen mother left the seventh prince's residence and went to Shijin restaurant to buy her son and husband a just-baked bao bao duck. Then she immediately entered the prison. The family of three sat opposite each other silently. So our family became the seventh prince. So our family has already become the seventh prince's sacrifice. After a long time, Shen father sighed deeply. Shen mother nodded, tears surging up again. Zhou Yunsheng was buried in a bowl of warm rice and chewing on a duck leg. After he ate his fill, he opened. He now extensively favors concubine Xie Shi, has disregarded older sister, and also repeatedly mocked and rebuked her. It's good that he has abandoned our house. Now Xie Shi won't be able to enjoy all the benefits of us someday helping him win power. Here he lowered his voice. Father, how about we seek worthier pastures? Shen father's beard trembled in anger. He shoved him into the food box and roared, Seek what seek? Even our lives are not guaranteed. But you're still thinking about these things? I do not know where your confidence comes from. Zhu Yunsheng broke free from Shen father's hands with great difficulty, face covered with rice grains. He yelled out, I'm willing to confess, but I need to meet the emperor first, or I'll smash my head to death. Because the emperor was anxious to find a person who wrote the essay, every day he repeatedly asked questions, but Chen Yibin was unexpectedly tight-lipped. Even with almost broken buttocks, he refused to yield. The Supreme Court's high-ranking official was under a lot of pressure. Since he was finally willing to confess, they quickly sent someone to inform the emperor, also regarding it as pleading guilty. One meeting would result in him obtaining an amazing subordinate. The Tianjin emperor waved his hands, allowing the request. The father and son were brought before the emperor, then knelt down and saluted. Who is that man? Where does his family live? The Tianjin emperor impatiently inquired. Reporting to the emperor, the person you are looking for is right in front of you. It is humble I. Zhu Yunsheng's cheek was still littered with a few grains of rice. His appearance was really unsightly. The Tianjin emperor's face instantly darkened. Zhu Yunsheng immediately added, replying to the emperor, this commoner could speak at 8 months, could write poetry at 3 years, had a facial imagination as a small boy, highly intelligent, and what's more, this commoner has an incredible memory. This commoner has read a lot of books and is very knowledgeable. That policy essay really is this commoner's humble writing. This commoner seeks the emperor's insight. This kind of person Chen Yibin was, no one knew better than what kind of person Chen Yibin was. No one knew better than Chen father. When he heard his son boasting so boldly, he desperately wanted to pounce over and block his son's mouth. But because this was the Xinseng Hall, and they were before royalty, he didn't dare act rashly. The Tianjin emperor listened to his speech, then unexpectedly laughed. He threw over the book placed on the table, Huainanzi, and said in a heavy voice, I give you a quarter of an hour to read it, then recite it. One wrong word, and you will be dragged out and flogged to death. Shen father immediately cold-sweated like a waterfall. but Zhou Yunsheng respectfully replied, reporting to the emperor, "A quarter of an hour is not needed. Merely a few breaths is enough." After saying this, he picked up the book, flipped through it once, returned the book to the chief palace eunuch beside the emperor, then closed his eyes to recite. The Tiantian emperor held the book to compare. His expression turned from gloomy to surprised, then surprised to astonished. "Wait, start reciting from the third line on the 76th page," he ordered. Zhu Yunsheng didn't pause at all, reciting from the third line's first word, not one mistake. "Recite from the 100th page, 6th line." Zhu Yunsheng continued to switch recitation. Begin reciting from the third word on the 7th line on page 38. Zhu Yunsheng nodded and did according to his words. His soul power was formidable. His stated memorization abilities were not exaggerated, but he also had the super search engine 007. Even if the Tiantian emperor found the most uncommon book in Dazhou, he would still know it by heart. The Tiantian emperor was stunned, speechless for a long time. After he regained his senses, he grew anxious about the possibility that he had memorized the book at an earlier time. So he sent people to the Imperial Hanlon Academy to look for the dictionary the Academy had just completed. The dictionary had not yet been published, only the staff that compiled it and the Tiantian Emperor have seen it. It had millions of words, a mighty volume. "I'll give you a quarter of an hour, memorize this dictionary." This time he didn't throw the book, letting the servant closest to him hand it over. His tone was also a lot more relaxed. Anyone could see that he was already somewhat convinced. Shen Father was kneeling in place. From time to time he turned to look at his son, as if he didn't recognize him. Zhu Yunsheng promised, then, like before, flipped through the dictionary with the fastest speed. Under the Tiantian Emperor's examination, he recited forward, inverted, middle, and from specific sections, changing the pattern, displaying his ability to never forget. The Tiantian Emperor was completely convinced. He was silent for a long time before he gently asked, "Since you have such big talent, why did you buy the exam questions? Would this not pointlessly cause trouble?" Zhu Yunsheng exposed a helpless expression. Reporting to the emperor, this communist page boy thought that this commoner couldn't pass the exam and bought the exam questions without authorization. This commoner only learned of this afterwards. This commoner wondered how a practice exam question would be bought for several thousand silver, realizing that it was to allow persons to cheat. After glancing at it, it was thrown away. This commoner is ignorant, begging the emperor for forgiveness. The Tiantian emperor nodded and pondered. After a moment, he probed. "Your twice taxation system is also not a perfect policy, do you know?" Zhu Yunsheng cupped his hands and replied, his attitude neither overbearing nor servile. Reporting to the emperor, this commoner knows, but because the policy essay had limited writing space, this commoner was unable to write out many words. The twice taxation system has 4 shortcomings. First, long-term unadjusted household registration and failure to implement the principle of equal divided burden between rich and poor. Second, the tax rate of the household tax portion of twice taxation is calculated in money. Because the imperial court collects the money, the amount of money circulating on the market is insufficient, and the phenomenon of the price of money outweigh the worth of goods will soon arise. The common people will start to sell their silk fabrics grain, or other products at cheap prices in order to earn tax money, increasing their life burden. Third, under the twice taxation systems, legal selling and buying of land annexation would be even more prevalent. The rich. He broke down the possible problems that could arise from the implementation of the twice taxation system, one by one. On this basis, he suggested the more reasonable single whip law and Tanding Luomu. His long-term vision, exhaustive thoughtfulness, and orderliness made the Tiantian emperor slap the table in praise. Come, give Shen Gongzi and official Shen a seat. The Tiantian emperor personally stepped down from the throne to help the two people up, wearing a bathing in spring breeze-like smile. As long as they were real learned scholar, they would be able to get his preferential treatment, not to mention Chen Yibin, this once-in-a-lifetime genius. Zhou Yunsheng's ass was very sore. After sitting down, he trembled, making the Tiantian emperor feel even more guilty. The two people shifted the topic from tax reform to land reform, then to border defense war. Zhou Yunsheng's refined speech and sharp, thought-provoking sentences made the Tiantian emperor powerless to end the conversation, wishing he could keep him in the palace to talk all night. Shen father was already dull, holding a teacup, staring blankly at his son. Soon the place was closed for the day. The palace was closed for the day. At this, the Tiantian emperor remembered the father and son's injuries and hunger. He quickly summoned an imperial physician and the imperial meal. After taking care of their wounds and eating dinner, the Tiantian emperor personally guided the two to the Qinsang Palace gate, laughing. Yibin is so talented. Why were you so unremarkable before? Zhou Yunsheng blushed red, then cupped his hand and said, reporting to the emperor, because my father was eager for me to succeed. If this commoner let him know this commoner's wisdom, he would certainly keep this commoner at home all day, and won't let this commoner out until every classic in Dazzle is read. This commoner is a lover of slapstick, unable to sit still. Therefore, this commoner hit a little clumsily. Shen Yibin was only 17 years old. Because he inherited his parents' good looks, when his slightly childish face flushed, he actually looked indescribably pure and lovely. Even the rice grain stuck to his cheek didn't damage his charm. The Tiantian emperor carefully sized him up. The more he looked, the more he liked. Then he personally picked the rice grain off his face and laughed heartily. Where were you hiding a little clumsily? You were hiding very clumsily. Zhou Yunsheng looked embarrassed, which caused the Tiantian emperor to laugh again. The father and son boarded the carriage. When they left the palace grounds, Shen father finally caught up to reality, swinging his fists to give his son a good beating. I made you hide. I made you hide. If not for facing certain death after buying the real exam questions, did you intend to hide for a lifetime? Zhou Yunsheng dodged the fists while jokingly saying, truly, nobody understands one's son better than his father. The son really doesn't want to be an official. Being an official is too tiring. Going to court every day before the sun even comes up. Shen father finished swinging his fist. Suddenly letting out a turbid breath, he smiled. Even if you don't want to be one, you have to be one. How can the emperor let you get away? I thought my Shen family was in a hopeless situation, but I didn't expect that I could actually give birth to such a good son. Good son, are you hurt? Zhou Yunsheng was terrified by his father's sappy tone. Chapter 3. The Shen family's father and son not only went back home unscathed. Shen Yibin received the emperor's decree, saying that after the investigation was finished, He had to participate in the palace exam. It seemed that if he didn't seize the champion position, he couldn't become an official in the future. This showed the Tianjin Emperor's high expectations for Shen Yibin. As long as he really got top marks in the imperial examinations, it would be easy to achieve meteoric success and reach the highest official position in the future. Shen Mother turned several laps around her son, happily saying, "I knew my son was the world's most intelligent son. Since he was small, he was clever." Shen Father recalled his son's childhood cleverness and also sighed for a while. He thought his son was a pitiful Zhongyong. How could he foresee that he was actually deliberately concealed? Thinking about it, he really didn't know whether to laugh or get angry. "Yibin, father thought about it. I think you were right. The seventh prince is too unrighteous. Since your sister is no longer beloved, we should switch alliances to another prince." Shen Father stroked his beard and sighed. "But if we don't help the seventh prince, wouldn't Xiao Dan's life in his residence be even more difficult?" Shen Mother's eyes were red with worry. "Mother, you misunderstood. As long as the Shen family doesn't fall, the seventh prince wouldn't dare mistreat sister. Plus, this son heard that the seventh prince now only pampers concubine Xie. The other women are treated as heir. If we support the seventh prince, the one who gains maximum benefit will not be sister, but the pampered Xie. So should we do such a thing? So why should we do such a thankless thing?" Zhou Yunsheng placatingly patted the back of Shen Mother's hand. Shen Mother thought for a moment, finding his words reasonable. She also thought about how the seventh prince refused to help them, and even denounced and confined her daughter. The Shen family was really being kicked while it was down, so she no longer opposed. Because the palace eunuch stole the exam questions handwritten by the emperor, the Tianjin emperor unrestrainedly purged the inner palace. He disposed of all the spies planted by every faction, so the seventh prince still didn't know that the earth-shattering tax policy was actually written by the unremarkable Shen Yibin. Jie Yudo was reborn. She'd long since made friends with the talented ministers who supported the seventh prince in her past life, one of whom was Lin Wenji, whose proxy essay for numerous imperial exam candidates made him world famous. When she learned that the emperor had an exceedingly wonderful policy essay in hand and was searching Beijing for the author, she mentioned Lin Wenji to the seventh prince, only saying that she accidentally found an amazingly talented person, prompting the seventh prince to investigate. The seventh prince was trying to please his imperial father, but he was also trying to recruit a talented individual, so he personally searched for Lin Wenji. Lin Wenji was a concubine's son, and he was quite suppressed by the first wife. He wanted to participate in this session of the civil service exams, but the first wife refused to find a guarantor for him, and also instructed the servants to burn his various correspondence letters, so that he had no way out. He had a miserable life, and had no choice but to write poetry to earn money. Over time, his name spread to all corners. As the civil service exams neared, people flocked to his door for essays, all on the subject of Zuyong Diao. They repeatedly warned him not to publicize the matter and to never write the same essay in a public context. The prize offers were many tens of thousands and a few thousands. Lin Wenji was very clever, quickly discerning the key points, so he devoted himself to study for a few days and wrote a wonderful essay, then simultaneously sold it to many exam candidates. He did so in order to escalate the situation so the Tiantian emperor would notice him. Therefore, when the seventh prince came to his door, he was already wearing his best scholarly robe to warmly welcome him in. The seventh prince discussed the classic with him, feeling that he was already extraordinarily educated. Then he explained his purpose for visiting. Lin Wenji's essay had already spread among the examiners, then spread around the imperial court, but Zhou Yunsheng's essay had been cautiously collected by the Qian emperor. He'd also warned the examiner who discovered the essay to not publicize it, so people with ulterior motives couldn't perform mischief. As a result, the seventh prince only knew about Lin Wenji's policy essay. He didn't know that there was one far more superior to it. The two men matched essays. Lin Wenji pretended to be fearful. The original Zhou Yongdiao essay was actually written here. Carmen is ignorant. Carmen deserves death. The seventh prince quickly helped him up, explaining that his imperial father didn't blame him, but was actually continuously searching for him, wanting to order him to efficiently serve in the court. Lin Wenji's heart was smirking in satisfaction, but he pretended to decline a few times before following the seventh prince to the palace. In Qinzheng Hell, the Tiantian emperor was silent, only seizing up Lin Wenji with gloomy eyes. When Lin Wenji's cold sweat was resembling a waterfall, he finally opened. "Since you say that the essay was written by you, can you recite it for me?" Lin Wenji composed himself, then recited the essay after a respectful, at your Majesty's command." The Lin Chen emperor's cold expression turned into contempt, followed by a little pity. If Zhou Yunsheng's excellent essay didn't exist, the Tiantian emperor would have handpicked this essay as the best and brightest. But he had also been very curious about the writer of the other essay, and even planned to place him in an important position if he had good character. However, this person heard that there was an outstanding essay in the municipal exam and hastily rushed to the palace to claim it. Anyone could see that his egotistic heart was very heavy, and he thought very highly of himself. Compared to the free and laid-back, pure and natural Shen Yibin, he was simply unsightly. "Enough. This essay is good, but not good enough to impress me. You learned well, but you're still somewhat short-sighted and hasty." The Tiantian emperor picked the well-thumbed essay off the table and handed it to a nearby attendant. "Gaining knowledge requires humbleness. Let him take a look at this, so he learns where he lost." Lin Wenji knew that something had gone wrong. He fought against his fear to take the essay and scan it. After a while, he paled. "Young Seven, you look too." The Tiantian emperor waved his sleeves. The seventh prince did according to his words. After reading, he was extremely shocked. "Expressive, brilliant, elegant, such remarkable work. Dare I ask, Imperial Father, which learned scholar wrote this?" The seventh prince sincerely bowed down low. "Was it not your brother-in-law?" The Tiantian emperor laughed heartily and said, "He wanted more time to play, so he actually behaved foolishly in front of official Shen for a few years. If he was not forced into a desperate situation, I don't know how long he would have stayed hidden." The seventh prince's heart jumped fiercely. Stunned, he raised his head to look towards the imperial throne. The Tiantian emperor was too lazy to explain, dismissing, "I'm tired, you may leave. Whenever you study, don't forget to cultivate your heart. Remember that there are people beyond people and heavens beyond heavens." Lin Wenji was deathly ashamed. He repeatedly no-towed, then retreated while covering his face. The seventh prince ordered someone to send him home. no longer concerned with recruiting him. Sitting in the carriage, he carefully recalled that policy essay. Such a beautiful essay came from Shen Yibin's hand. Even if he was beaten to death, he would never expect that. However, his imperial father was wise and brilliant, very decisive. If he said yes, then it was certainly not wrong. He thought of the disgraceful situation that had just occurred because of his desire for his imperial father's praise. He thought of his imperial father's great esteem for Shen Yibin. He thought of his cold treatment of Shen Xiaodan, and now he didn't lift a finger to help the Shen family, and how he didn't lift a finger to help the Shen family. By now, the Shen family must have already cast him out of their hearts. The seventh prince's cheeks reddened, like he received dozens of ruthless slaps. His cheeks even felt a dull ache. Shen Yibin would receive a high position, and Shen Hui was a first-class talented official in Dazhou. To lose the Shen family's father and son's support was no different than losing two capable assistants. The seventh prince's regret was insurmountable. He also hated Xie Yudo, who misled him. After he returned to the palace, he naturally rebuked her. She thought she'd ruined Shen Hui's career. How could she anticipate that Shen Yibin would emerge unexpectedly even more capable than Shen Hui? Xie Yudo carefully recalled Shen Yibin's last life. In her memory, he was a true dandy. The slightest bit of talent for learning couldn't be seen. Shen Yibin loved to play around in the last life. Shen Hui's position couldn't be shaken, so he was naturally happy to live free. In this life, she forced him into a dead end, so he showed off his capabilities. Could it be her unrestrained actions led to this mutation? Then in the future, wouldn't more unforeseen events occur? With the Shen family's support, could the seventh prince still smoothly without the Shen family's support, could the seventh prince still smoothly ascend the throne? Thinking of this, Xie Yudo panicked. She cursed herself for acting too carelessly. She'd actually picked up a stone to crush her own feet. But then she recalled that she'd carved out an escape route with the crown prince a long time ago, and because of this, no matter how many courtiers supported the crown prince, he would dig his own grave sooner or later. At this, her calm mood returned. The truth about the fraud case finally came to light, and a large number of the crown prince's subordinates were ousted. The crown prince himself was also severely reprimanded by the Tianjin emperor in front of numerous court officials, losing all faith. After 2 days of resting and reorganization, the Tianjin emperor issued an imperial edict that ordered the tribute courtyard to reopen the municipal exam. Zhu Yunsheng took first place without suspense, smoothly qualifying for the palace exam. This time, the topic of the palace exam was still very simple, only 3 words. The 4 classes. The enormous complex content, abstract concept, and the difficulty of establishing the topic caused many students to frown and worry. For a very long time, they didn't dare write. Zhu Yunsheng closed his eyes for a moment, and when he reopened them, his writing flowed like water, finishing in one go. The 4 categories of people, the country's pillars. Therefore, men shouldn't hold more than one official post. Officials shouldn't double work. The 4 classes different from the countryside to province. Therefore, the agricultural eloquence of the farmers, intellectual words and deeds of the scholars, the workmanship of the artisans, the skillful tongue of the merchants. He abandoned the current popular landowners are noble, merchants are lowly views, and comprehensively expounded on the contribution to societal progress the various occupations achieved, especially the major role business development played in the country's rise, showing off his abilities between words. Most of the essays written during the palace examination attached a lot of importance to stability, preferring moderation over provoking the emperor's sore spot. But Zhu Yunsheng's analysis through 0707 showed him the reason why the Tianqian emperor wanted to reform the tax system. It was actually in order to reopen the seaport, preparing to welcome foreign trade. This essay not only didn't poke his sore spots, it poked his itchy spots. Sure enough, when the Tianqian emperor came to his table, he only needed to read the first two lines before becoming transfixed. Waiting until the full text was complete, then he couldn't help but applaud. All the other candidates looked over. They could already figure out who was the section's champion. When the palace exam had barely ended, the Tianqian emperor impatiently summoned Zhou Yunsheng. They debated in Qinseng Hall until the day turned dark. Then he reluctantly let him leave. 3 days later, an imperial edict came down. Sure enough, Shen Yibin was the champion. Furthermore, he was awarded the official position of an academician in the Imperial Hanlan Academy. It was only the first step in his career. Yet he already became a 5th-ranked minister in the emperor's inner circle. He was only 18, not yet 20. If he properly learned through experience for a few years, he'd become a prime minister someday. Today's Shen Yibin became the hottest figure in Beijing. The people dropping by to propose marriage almost wore out the Shan family's threshold. Zhu Yunsheng used career first, family later as an excuse to reject them all. Shan father and Shan mother were now wishing they could dote on him to death. Naturally, whatever he said wouldn't be rejected. The 7th prince's residence. The 7th princess was looking through Shen Xiaodan's gift list. He felt that it was inappropriately and increased it by 30%, opening warmly. After Yibin joins the Imperial Academy, communication with others can't be avoided. As a sister, you should prepare more things that aid to socialize for him. Concubine understands. Concubine will go to take a look at the treasures once more. Shen Xiaodan smiled sweetly, but her eyes no longer held even a little bit of camaraderie for the 7th prince. She already knew that she had been sterilized by drugs. She had long lost her will to fight for favor. But as long as her family was influential, her status in the 7th prince's residence couldn't be shaken. Rather than trying to please the 7th prince, it would be better to increase the affection between her and her brother. That was something she could rely on for a lifetime. Shen Xiaodan left the main hall and ran into the haggard-faced Jiao Yuru. She couldn't help but smile scornfully. So what if you're favored again? As long as my Shan family doesn't fall, you can't surpass me. All your past scheming, sooner or later, they'll be paid back. Chapter 4. Because of the Crown Prince's poor supervision and failure to investigate his subordinates led to the fraud case. After the news spread, the Crown Prince's reputation among the officials and scholars was very bad. His already unsteady position as heir to the throne became increasingly precarious. Unfortunately, the Tianqian emperor had not yet completely lost confidence in the Crown Prince. After ordering him to reflect on his shortcomings for a few days, he still assigned him the job of presiding over the Qianglin banquet attempting to let him save a bit of reputation. However, the Crown Prince was not at all grateful, so when the Tianjin Emperor retired from the banquet, his expression immediately soured. He focused on pouring out the wine jug and drinking, ignoring the other guests. Because of this municipal exam, he'd lost a large number of subordinates and was already reprimanded by his imperial father in front of numerous officials. He'd already lost all of his face. How could he have a good impression of this batch of students? Zhou Sheng sat under the head seat, secretly sizing up the legendarily licentious and arrogant His Highness, the Crown Prince. He was extremely handsome, a pair of slender sword-like eyebrows slanting into the hair on his temples, and a pair of long and narrow, twinkling phoenix eyes. He always watched people with a sense of haughtiness, which invoked involuntary fear. He was wearing worn-out black clothes, his lapel wide open, revealing snow-white inner clothes. Because the fabric was too thin, it actually outlined his smooth muscle lines. Even from far away, you could perceive that his seemingly emaciated body still contained a powerful force. His posture was very idle. He sat with his legs spread, very bold, one hand holding the wine jug, the other holding a wine cup. Because he drank too much, his eyes were somewhat blurred, but he didn't look sound. On the contrary, he looked sharper and wilder. He seemed to find the activity somewhat boring, putting down the wine cup and propping his cheeks on his hand, smiling faintly as he sized up the crowd of students. But his cold eyes caused all the guests to feel frightened, lowering their heads to avoid his gaze. The temper of this royalty was infamously volatile. It was easy to provoke a deathly calamity without even finding out which word triggered him. He dared to play around with the Tianjin Emperor's imperial concubines, dared to intercept the state treasurer's taxes, taking the silver for his own use, and even dared to brandish his sword and stab a court counselor who angered him during an imperial court session, resulting in serious injuries. His style of action could be summed up in one word: mad. 4 words: mad to the extreme. With him on location, the other guests didn't dare to be noisy. They didn't even dare to breathe too loudly. At this moment in the palace hall, except for the sounds from the musicians, no one said a word. Zhou Yunsheng regained his line of sight, inwardly lamenting the Crown Prince's good looks. Even this world's male protagonist, the 7th Prince, was no match for him. At the same time, the Crown Prince was also seizing up the champion. The world knew that the Crown Prince loved beauty. Whoever he fancied, whether man or woman, he would capture them. Chen Yibin was a first-class beauty. He could be called a talented young scholar. He looked like a spring flower with a pair of vibrant peach blossom eyes. After drinking, his eyes were slightly damp, unexpectedly resembling a small animal, pitiable and lovely. Plus, he was the youngest. Yet he was wearing the crimson champion gown. Sitting amongst a group of long-bearded old men, he resembled a firefly on a dark night, even more dazzling and difficult to ignore. The Crown Prince's eyes were deep. His fingers tapped the wine jug, quite a bit of ambiguity. His personal servant saw his hint and bent over to ask, "Your Highness, shall I call the champion over to have a drink with you?" "No." The Crown Prince waved his hand, pointing to another direction. "Call over that 3rd-place winner for me." Chen Yibin was very valuable to his imperial father. He was still aware of this point, so during this Yonglin banquet, he absolutely couldn't touch the champion. The 3rd-place winner was 25 years old. Although he was not as peerless as Chen Yibin, he was also handsome, confident, and graceful. When he saw the Crown Prince point towards himself, His face immediately paled. Sir Tanhua, His Highness the Crown Prince requests your presence. Perhaps it was psychological, but the third-place winner felt that the voice of this eunuch contained malevolence, like the Grim Reaper demanding his soul. He desperately wanted to refuse, but he met the Crown Prince's sly and unreadable gaze, and his whole body went limp. Not to mention to speak. Even standing up was impossible, and he accidentally overturned a whole pot of wine on top of his body. Everyone quietly glanced at him, eyes filled with 120,000 points of sympathy. Dare to ask the eunuch, could the Shen be fortunate enough to drink with His Highness the Crown Prince? Suddenly, Zhou Yunsheng smiled and faintly cupped his hands. The personal servant quickly looked over at him, bowing. If the champion wants it, it's naturally welcomed. Please. The third-place winner looked at the juvenile walking over to the seat of honor, unable to help feeling relieved, recording this kindness. Even more, the others endlessly admired the champion for his generous self-sacrifice. There was a saying that being close to the emperor could be as perilous as lying with a tiger, but they felt that this heir to the throne was even fiercer than a tiger. The Crown Prince obviously didn't expect Zhou Yunsheng to take the initiative to come over. He swung his sleeves, indicating that the other side could sit down. Then he observed him. When he found that there was no reluctancy or fear on the young boy's face, his gloomy mood inexplicably improved. "You're actually perceptive. You've done me a favor," he said, smiling insincerely. Zhou Yunsheng cupped his hands, his tone very light. "This isn't a favor. The small official will serve as an academician in the Imperial Hanlan Academy starting tomorrow. And every day the small official will study with the Crown Prince. Naturally, the small official should get closer to the Crown Prince, so as not to ruin the assignment." He not only looked pure and lovely, even his voice carried the clearness and translucency of youth. Listening to it made others feel extremely comfortable. The Crown Prince sneered, but his eyes softened, thinking that the newborn calf was unafraid of the tiger. Zhou Yunsheng lowered his head and touched his nose, his line of sight moving to the Crown Prince's wooden clocks. The spring-cold snap still had not passed. At night, wearing padded cloaks to feel warm was still necessary, but the Crown Prince was dressed very flimsily, and he actually had on wooden clogs. Was he not afraid of the cold? The doubt flickered and faded away in his heart. The Crown Prince personally handed him a cup of wine, but he quickly took a sip, his eyes lightening up slightly. This was a bottle of the imperial wine, Xifeng, and it was boiling hot. The aftertaste was unforgettable. The Crown Prince watched him lick his lips longingly, a small pink tongue probing out, very enticing. He really liked this view, persuading the young boy to drink a few more cups. The two toasted and drank, chatting and laughing quietly. It unexpectedly didn't look like it was their first meeting. They seemed like close friends who'd known each other for many years. The seventh prince, who was also in attendance, was waiting for the Crown Prince to lose his temper. Then he could come out to rescue Shen Yibin and show off his good intention to the Shen family. But when he saw this scene, he couldn't help but feel depressed. The Crown Prince was addicted to alcohol. After drinking a bottle of Xifeng, he ordered the servants to fetch 2 jugs of long-awaited tribute wine and place them in boiling water, so they could continue drinking when it reached the proper temperature. Drinking on an empty stomach can cause illness. Pad your belly with some food. Seeing the boy's flushed cheek and blurred eyes, the Crown Prince chuckled, reaching out to pat his hair. "Ah, of course." Zuyin's body was still very tender, without a body that had been perfected to the point where 1,000 cups wouldn't intoxicate it. Zhou Sheng was already somewhat dizzy. 007 could adjust the body's constitution, but he was currently in full view of everyone. He had no chance to fiddle with the AI on his wrist to dissipate the effect of the alcohol. Moreover, if a drunk man miraculously returned to normal in 1 second, it would be too suspicious. Plus, the Crown Prince was still staring at him. He dug into his bowl, then stared blankly at the Crown Prince, complaining, "This food is cold, unpalatable." "It's delicious when it's cold." The Crown Prince smiled inexplicably, picking up the bowl and eating seriously. He even finished 2 bowls. Then he continued drinking, but he didn't forget to fill the cup of the young champion by his side. Zhu Chang had already become stupid, his brain filled with alcohol. The food was also pushing to the top of his throat, ready to come back out at any time. Seeing the Crown Prince still wanting to pour him more wine, he brushed him away and staggeringly ran out. Everyone thought that the champion finally couldn't stand the harassment and ran away. They couldn't help but reveal tense looks. The Crown Prince also believed this, his face immediately becoming extremely unsightly, his hand reaching for the sword at his waist, his eyes concealing bloody rage. He thought that he'd managed to make a friend with a matching personality, but he didn't expect him to also be so insensible, so it would be better to kill him to avoid being an irksome presence. The 7th Prince originally wanted to stand up and plead for leniency, but when he saw that the Crown Prince was ready to kill, he sat back down, rethinking. In any case, the Shan family was already at odds with him. Saving Xian Yibin this time might not result in any gratefulness. But if the Crown Prince killed him, the Shan family would fall out with the Crown Prince, and his imperial father would be bitterly disappointed with the Crown Prince, which would be considered killing 2 birds with 1 stone. All the other princes also thought this way, so for a long time no one stood up to dissuade the Crown Prince. The 3rd place winner struggled for a long time, but just as he was about to say a few words, he saw the eunuch that had chased after the champion come back, then whisper something to the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince raised his eyebrows, his gloomy expression instantly clearing. Then he stumped off without a word. Everyone was stunned, finally witnessing the Crown Prince's temperamentality. In the Imperial Garden, Zhou Yunsheng was lying near the lotus pond, vomiting. He was just about to adjust his body's information to sober when the Crown Prince arrived, amusement in his eyes. "Only a few pots of wine and you're actually drunk to this extent. Really useless." "I'm only 17 years old," Zhou Yunsheng complained, his speech-blossom eyes damp with tears. He was also captured by the Lord God when he was only 16, not yet at the legal drinking age. Although he reincarnated for tens of thousands of years, he still firmly considered himself to be forever 16. The Crown Prince found the situation to be even funnier, mumbling that he was a pure boy. Julian Shen ignored him, continuing to vomit into the pond. When he saw that the fish were continuously surfacing to swallow his vomit, he vomited again, his already empty stomach only bringing up bile. He shouted in disbelief. "They're actually eating my vomit. So disgusting. I didn't think the fish in the Imperial Garden would be so disgusting." The Crown Prince couldn't keep a straight face, his chuckle becoming bright laughter. After laughing his fill, he took out a handkerchief and personally helped the boy wipe his mouth. His action was very gentle. He liked this boy's intimate and unruffled attitude towards him, so he unconsciously put down his guard and let go of his worries. Zhou Yunsheng thanked him and leaned on his hand to stand up. Then his heartbeat became slightly alarmed. The Crown Prince's hand was very hot. It seemed to be burning up. It was obviously not the normal body temperature. He couldn't help but lean in closer, picking up the faint smell of drugs. Because his 5 senses were more enhanced than a normal person's, He could distinguish stalactites, amethysts, milky quartz, sulfur, ochre, arsenic ore, and even poppy and other medicinal ingredients. The crown prince was personally raised and educated by the Tiantian emperor. He'd obtained his father's wisdom. From an early age, he'd shown extraordinary political talent. But 3 years ago, his temperament went through huge changes. Not only becoming extravagant and careless, he started behaving more and more reckless and violent. The Tiantian emperor repeatedly called him before the throne to rebuke him, but no matter what, he never changed his ways. Zhu Yunshan felt that he'd found the root cause of the crown prince's major change in temperament. Chapter 5. That night, Zhu Yunshan went back home and told Grandfather of his drunk antics and other events. I didn't think you would actually enter His Highness the Crown Prince's eyes. This can be considered rare. In recent years, His Highness' temperament has been violent, so there are few friendly encounters. Grandfather stroked his beard inside, but his heart was quite worried. This prince's behavior was audacious. He gradually lost his saintly heart, and in recent years a few court consuls have repeatedly presented memorials to the emperor to request a change of heir. It was a disaster for his son to get too close to him, not good fortune. Zhu Yunsheng also knew Shenfather's thoughts, continuing, "When your son accidentally angered the crown prince, the seventh prince was silent in his seat. He was obviously pleased at the events. Father, the seventh prince is not our ally." Shenfather's eyes darkened, then he silently withdrew. Zhu Yunsheng returned to his room, sent away his personal servant, and sat in front of his lamp to meditate. He'd reincarnated many lifetimes, one of which was the founder of demon cult. Not only was his martial arts high, his knowledge of poison was unparalleled in the world. The scent of drugs on Crown Prince's body was thick. He obviously took the drug at least once a day, but this prescription was really deadly. The name of the medicine was Hanqi-san. Its common name was 5-mineral powder. After taking it, people enter into a state of euphoria, but its more fundamentally usefulness was actually the temperament of typhoid fever, and it was a life-saving medicine. The proper use could quickly heal the typhoid fever and stabilize the body, but its abuse could cause addiction, poisoning the body. Taking Hanqi-san could lead to a high fever. If not promptly cooled down, the patient would die. The method of heat removal was eating cold food, wearing thin clothes, sleeping on cold beds, cold baths, etc. The body couldn't get into contact with the tiniest bit of heat, but it was also necessary to drink a lot of wine, and the wine needed to be warm and good. The drunk state would greatly improve heat distribution. After taking it for a long time, many side effects would appear in the body. A violent temper was only the first side effect. There was also excessive high body temperature and easily bruised thin skin, so wearing soft, overwashed, well-worn clothes was necessary. They couldn't wear new clothes, and the clothes needed to be relaxed and elegant, not too tight. In order to reduce foot bruising, they had to give up boots and only wear wooden clogs. The point was, the crown prince didn't suddenly turn arrogant and wild. He had no choice in the matter. Thinking of this, Zhu Yunsheng opened 007 and searched for the state of Hanqi-san in Da Zhou dynasty. A moment later, he let out a guttural sigh. Da Zhou dynasty didn't have Hanqi-san on its records. Obviously, the drug was a secret drug, not handed down from ancient times. In the entire Da Zhou dynasty, perhaps only the crown prince was using it. The thoughts of the person who'd offered him this drug, Zhu Yunsheng almost didn't need to think to guess this. The crown prince was 27, the prime of life. The Tiantian emperor looked healthy, but he was already over 50. In these ancient times, he could be considered past longevity. Sooner or later, he'd have to fly on a crane to the Western Paradise. The Tianjin Emperor had always doted on the Crown Prince extravagantly. The Crown Prince also worked hard. In politics, he could be described as omnipotent. His governing talent was even better than Tianjin Emperor's, and in his early years, he'd received the support of most of the court councillors and the common people. With such a good heir, who would be dissatisfied? As long as the Crown Prince was stable, naturally no one would surpass him. Someone couldn't shake the Crown Prince's position from the outside, so they tried to destroy it from the inside. He had no choice but to admit that this method was very clever, getting rid of the most powerful enemy without a weapon or soldier. Recalling the heroine who had the medical space and spiritual spring, Zhu Yunsheng guessed this Hanshi son was 99% the heroine and the seventh prince's handwriting. If they wanted to destroy the crown prince, then Zhu Yunsheng would ruin their plans and help the crown prince ascend the throne. Decided, Zhu Yunsheng blew out the candles and lied down to rest. The crown prince felt that the small champion was very interesting. Not only did he look beautiful, his courage was also great. He didn't exude flourishing vitality all the time, so when he was called in to see him, he felt comfortable. Your Highness, do you have more questions? Zhu Yunsheng held the book of changes and bowed slightly. The crown prince seemed to be listening to his lecture, but he was actually staring at his graceful opening and closing lips. He saw him glance over with his pair of peach blossom eyes, and finally woke up, waving. No, sit down. Help me practice my characters for a while. After getting along for 1 month, the two had already become extremely familiar. Zhu Yunsheng sat down and automatically grinded ink for the crown prince. The crown prince used to write in a quick and bold, semi-cursive script. But 3 years ago, he suddenly switched to a cursive, and it was the most difficult to master wild cursive. He had extraordinary talent and understood many things. After a few months, he'd mastered wild cursive. Zhu Yunsheng looked down to see him write quickly and powerfully, penetratingly, the words rapidly flowing onto the paper. Too much I have decayed. Alas, all my life I've seen friends and companions fade away. And now how many of them are left, with grey hair hanging in vain, 3,000 meters long? I laugh away all worldly things. Is there anything left, you ask, that might cheer me up? I see in green mountains such alluring charm. I expect that they see the same in me. For in height and in appearance, we are a bit similar. Goblet in hand, scratching my head by the east window, I presume that Tao Yuanming, having finished his poem, Halting Clouds, was in the same mood now I am. Those on the south side of the Yangtze who got drunk only to seek fame, how could they know the magic of the turbid wine? Looking back, I conjure a gust of wind and send clouds flying. I regret not that I can't meet the ancients, but that the ancients had no chance to see my wildness. The number of people who understand me is no more than 2 or 3. This poem is called Congratulation to Bridegroom by Xin Qiao, translated from the How to Read Chinese Poetry. A guided anthology by Song Chi Kai. I regret not that I can't meet the ancients, but that the ancients had no chance to see my wildness. Zhu Yunsheng slowly chewed on this sentence. Then he caught a glimpse of the crown prince's hair on his temples, which was actually showing an early hint of grey, and couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. He could write such a magnificent poem in unrestrained calligraphy. The crown prince should not have such a ghastly look. Seeing the crown prince put down his writing brush, and pick up his wine cup, Zhu Yunsheng couldn't hold back his words any longer. Your Highness, you can't go on like this. The Crown Prince was not angry, only glancing at him with a faint smile. Zhou Yinsheng continued. Please, Your Highness, forgive this insolent official. This official wants to take a look at Your Highness's medication. Why, you want to try it? The Crown Prince put down the wine cup and raised a delicate brow. If someone else coveted his good god medicine, he would have long ago chopped that person into meat sauce. But since it was the small champion, he couldn't even work up the slightest bit of anger. No, if this small official wanted to try it, the small official would have already compounded it, and wouldn't wait until now. You would compound it? How? In this world, only I know the ingredients. Regardless of if it was appearance or ability, the Crown Prince was far above regular people. But one thing was somewhat unsatisfactory. That was his fragile body. This was an ever-present defect. It couldn't be managed, and every winter it would bring about an unbearable cough. But he was blessed by heaven. One day, while hunting outside of the palace, he saved the Taoist priest, and the Taoist priest was grateful, offering him a body-strengthening medicine. He said that after 5 years it would eradicate every illness and grant longevity. The Crown Prince helped the Taoist priest for several months, but the man died from his injuries despite the extensive medical care. The Crown Prince naturally tested the prescription on someone to find out if it was fake. But after the test subject took the drug, the effects was significant. The Crown Prince knew that if he sat on a supreme throne with a weak body, he'd always suffer. He tested the drug on dozens of test subjects, seeing their thin bodies grow more robust every day. How could he not be tempted? Now, he had already been taking the medicine for 3 years and had long been unable to get rid of the drug's control. Speaking of which, although this Hanshi sun was poisonous, it really could be regarded as a life-saving god medicine. After taking it, the fierce medicinal effect triggered Hu-Du, but after the Hu-Du spilled out, the accumulated severe illness would also be taken away, which really could quickly return someone to health. Its medicinal effect not only relied on cold food, cold clothes, cold baths, and cold beds, it also relied on a great amount of exercise which tempered the body. 3 years ago, the Crown Prince was very thin, but now he was muscular, which could clearly be seen through his open collar, so he was naturally convinced of the efficacy of the drug. Zhou Yinsheng quickly organized his words, cupping his hands to say, "Reporting to Your Highness, the small official's sense of smell is far above ordinary people. Just a sniff is required to distinguish all true smells. The small official is also quite proficient in traditional medicine. Your Highness takes this medicine all year round. Your body is thick with the smell of medicinal herbs. The small official learned the necessary ingredients of this drug and their quantity with one sniff." The Crown Prince was interested, hooking his lips in a smile. "Then tell me, if there's a mistake, I'll punish you." After saying this, he stroked the young man's slender neck, his movements dangerous and ambiguous. Zhou Yinsheng nodded, then listed the ingredients one by one. Stalactites, 3 potions. Amethysts, 2 potions. Milk quartz, half potion. Sulfur, 3 potions. Ochre. As he spoke, the Crown Prince's expression became capricious. Zhou Yinsheng was completely fearless. When he finished listening, he frankly said, "Reporting to your Highness, this medicine is a good medicine, but if it's taken for a long period of time, the outcome will be life-threatening. In recent years, Your Highness has become increasingly temperamental. This medicine is the initiator." The Crown Prince placed his right hand on his sword, his eyes flashing, killing intent leaking out. Zhou Yinsheng didn't wait for him to launch an attack, continuing, "Your honorable Highness, you certainly tested the medicine before taking it, But this method only checks the short-term effect, not the long-term. This small official has a better method. Your Highness can always punish this official for his insolence after testing it. This official also knows that today's words should not be said. He fears incurring death from excessive speech. But this official couldn't bear to let the Crown Prince be unknowingly killed by some schemer, so he risked death to advise royalty. Please, Your Highness, give the official a chance to prove himself. The Crown Prince pinched his jaw, his malicious gaze boring straight into him. Glimpsing the heavy concern and love in his eyes, the Crown Prince's heart shook fiercely. Fine, I'll give you a chance. After a long time, he let go of the boy. His thin lips raised to a cold smile. Zhou Shang's chin, already imprinted with a few purple bruises from his grip. He backed up 2 steps, rubbed his chin, his eyes tearful. Seeing this pitiable and lovely look, the Crown Prince's piled-up rage was unexpectedly swept away. The next day, the small champion brought 2 little white mice into the palace and presented them to His Highness the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince carefully raised them for several days. He seemed very fond of them. One day, when he returned from court, a palace eunuch hurriedly ran over, saying in a panic, "Reporting to Your Highness, the 2 white mice had an accident." The Crown Prince's heart was apprehensive. He quickly entered his room. He found the 2 already crazy white mice squeaking and biting at the golden cage. The 2 incisors were already broken, but they didn't give up, even using their claws to scratch, wrapping around each other in a crazy fight. A quarter of an hour later, only 2 pools of stinky flesh remained in the cage. The 2 lovely mice were long gone. The prince stared at the golden cage. His complexion changed from white to green, then green to purple. He was obviously angry to the extreme. What Taoist priest? What god medicine? What gratitude? Who is behind this? The second prince? Third? Fourth? Or are all of them joining hands to kill me? The Crown Prince slowly walked to the table, drank from the pot of warm wine, and finally couldn't suppress a chuckle. No matter who, he would rather kill them all than let one slip away. Chapter 6. When Zhou Yunsheng was summoned to the East Palace, the Crown Prince was standing in front of a huge mirror, surveying his body with a gloomy, unpredictable gaze. He had removed his robes and undergarments, and was only wearing thin underpants. His back and chest muscles were robust, lines graceful and smooth. 2 mermaid lines led to his crotch and were concealed, setting off his neatly arranged, compact abdominal muscles, and his bronze skin shined under the sunlight. This was an explosive and seductive body. Just a glance could deeply fascinate people. 2 palace maids who were holding his hair crown had already been blushing shyly for a long time, but they couldn't help but secretly cast over hot glances. Zhou Sheng stared blankly, then immediately bowed to salute, not daring to look. He liked strong, handsome men, and the Crown Prince happened to be his favorite kind of man. "Here you are." The Crown Prince dismissed the attendants and slowly asked, while gently stroking his abdominal muscles, "Look at this physique. Can it be considered perfect?" Zhou Sheng glanced at him, then nodded. The Crown Prince laughed coldly. "What a pity. The outside is perfect, but the inside is already corroded until nothing is left." Speaking here, the ruthlessness, hatred, despair, and madness, and other negative emotions hidden in the Crown Prince's eye were released, cascading, squeezing the air, making it tough to breathe. Zhou Sheng closed his eyes and warmly said, "If your Highness can quit Hanshi-san and properly recuperate for a few years, Your body still has the possibility of recovery. Only a possibility. The Crown Prince draped on his robe, and slowly walked over. The full 10 centimeter height difference and innate strong oppression made Zhou Yunsheng feel slightly out of sorts. If you don't quit, it is equivalent to using poison to quench the thirst. After 5 years, your highness will certainly die. Zhou Yunsheng had no choice but to retreat 2 steps, leaving the space of his hormonal radiation. The Crown Prince was silent for a long time. Then he finally waved his hand and said, "So be it, I will quit." Zhou Yunsheng bowed and cupped his hand, earnestly requesting, "Then please, your highness, bestow a directive document stating that during this period of rehabilitation, regardless of how the small official's action towards you may seem disrespectful, you will not punish the small official for this crime." The Crown Prince didn't answer, only looking at him with deep, unpredictable eyes. Zhou Yunsheng continued, "If your highness has an accident, this small official will accompany your highness to the Yellow Springs." After saying this, he raised his head, looking over with clear-as-water eyes. The Crown Prince seemed to be touched by him. His frosty expression warmed slightly. After a while, he nodded. "Bring the inkstone and paper." In the blink of an eye, half a year passed. This day, Zhou Yunsheng untied the silk rope, binding the Crown Prince's limb, and let out a murky breath. "How does your highness feel?" He delicately smeared ointment on the man's red and chafed wrists. The Crown Prince put his hands on his knees, staring at his gentle movements, declining to comment. How did it feel? From strong, he once again became weak. It naturally felt very uncomfortable, not to mention the bone-crushing, heart-gouging pain he'd experienced for half a year. But compared to his heavy body, his mind was unprecedentedly sober. He'd reviewed all kinds of things from his past, and it was like waking up from a deep dream, falling back to earth. How many years can I live? He knew that even if he quit the drug, he'd probably lost several years of his lifespan. The small official doesn't know, but it should be fine as long as you're well-maintained. Well-maintained? In my position, how can my heart settle down for maintenance? The Crown Prince chuckled, eyes full of ridicule. Zhou Yunsheng had no words. He bowed his head and retreated. The sober Crown Prince was far more difficult to get along with than the mad Crown Prince. In the past, although he was temperamental, his mood could be seen at a glance. Now he was deep as a dry well. No matter how his emotion fluctuated, he didn't reveal the slightest clue. Just like a peerless sword polished to completion, covering the edge but killing invisibly. In these 6 months, he'd secluded himself in the East Palace on the basis of illness, not only using the trick of injuring oneself to gain the enemy's confidence in order to recuperate the Tianshan Emperor's favor. He also arranged for second, third, and fourth prince to make successive mistakes and frequently make impulsive decisions. Their prestige in the court was greatly reduced, and the rest of the princes were affected, also obediently playing their part. He seemed to have returned to the past wise and brilliant air, but only Zhou Yunsheng knew that his heart had transformed. All his kindness had dissipated like dust in the wind, and only resentment remained. The Crown Prince saw that he was distancing himself from him more and more, and his expression was somewhat gloomy. He didn't order him to get up, slowly saying, "You and your father choose to serve me wholeheartedly, but you didn't expect that I was already a half-dead man. I fear I can't guarantee the Shen family 100 years of glory." Your Highness is Dazo's rightful heir. To serve your Highness wholeheartedly as expected. Zhou Sheng lowered his head and cupped his hands. At this time, he even couldn't guess the Crown Prince's thoughts. He had no choice but to follow the principle of talk less talk, less mistakes, so as not to be killed by the Crown Prince before his task was complete. Although his soul was immortal, this shell, Shen Yibin, was mortal. The Crown Prince also didn't know what he wanted the other man to say. Did he want him to show loyalty, or swear by heavens that his assistant was not out of selfishness, but completely from the heart? No matter who you are or what position you are in, I will always stand by you. On what grounds? And why must he obtain his sincerity? The Crown Prince didn't understand, staring at him for a long while. Then he finally waved to dismiss him. In the future, you call me Xinyan. Jin Sheng had already walked to the entrance when a deep, hoarse voice sounded behind him. Xinyan. These two words startled him fiercely, abruptly turning back to look. Scorching bright history of billions of years. This is my courtesy name. Do you have one? The Crown Prince raised his chin. Yun Sheng. The small official's courtesy name is Yun Sheng. He stared intensely at the pale and haggard man. Yun Sheng. This sounds familiar. The Crown Prince stared blankly. Yun Sheng almost wanted to rush over and grab his lapel, demanding where he'd heard that name, but he promptly suppressed this impulse. That man was just a string of data. Death meant disappearing forever. How could he follow him? Moreover, how could Xinyan know the name Zhou Sheng? He forcefully pushed down his throbbing heart and cautiously said, Don't worry, Your Highness. Your body will surely get better. The small official will certainly think of a way. Although this world had no panacea, there was a heroine with a spiritual spring, of which one mouthful could wash the marrow and burst the meridian channels. A total rebirth. He would think of a way to get it for the Crown Prince sooner or later. The boy's eyes were clear, his tone firm, as if he resolutely believed this sentence and would use his life force to fulfill it. The Crown Prince suddenly felt that even if he served him for selfish motives, so what? As long as he stayed by his side, it was enough. Your words, I will remember them. As long as I live, the Shen family will live. What Zhou Sheng wanted was an unshakable Shen family. He gave the Crown Prince a grateful smile, then bowed and retreated. 3 years later, the Crown Prince was sickly, but one day he finally completely recovered from his illness. However, his body was much thinner, his skin was pale as paper, his eyes were so deep they seemed bottomless, and his thin lips were scarlet like blood. Just watching him silently stand still would make people feel depressed for no reason. Since he seemed to have lost his past temperamentality, he received a few errands sent by the Tiantian Emperor. His performance was very beautiful. Even if a perceptive person stared at him, they couldn't grab a weak point. The Tiantian Emperor assessed him for a few months, then was finally completely relieved. One day, continuous torrential rain in the Liangjing district formed a disastrous flood, drowning out numerous large and small towns, causing the common people to be displaced. Living from hand to mouth, the courtiers successfully presented memorial reporting on the matter to the emperor, requesting the Tiantian Emperor to make a decision. The Tiantian Emperor pondered, then handpicked the Crown Prince and the Seventh Prince to jointly visit Liangjiang to deal with this matter. Because of the Crown Prince's ruthless manipulations, the other princes were all deemed failures, Only the filial, respectful, and humble seventh prince escaped the calamity. If this assignment could be completed beautifully, he would gain great face in front of the Tianqian emperor. The seventh prince was very happy. On the surface, he submitted to the crown prince, but after returning back, he discussed with several advisors about how to stand out. Zhu Yunsheng, who had already been promoted to assistant minister in the Ministry of Works, accompanied them. They traveled to Liangjiang. The flood was still wreaking havoc. The Inspector General of Liangjiang, Yu Baotian, personally went to the disaster area to appease the people and inspect the situation. When he heard that the Crown Prince was gracing them with his presence, he promptly set up a banquet at the official residence to entertain them. Calling it a banquet was a bit exaggerated. It was spread out on a ragged round table, with several missing dishes, cold steamed buns, and a few pickled vegetables. If there was no cheap tea to wash it down the throat, it was indeed a choking hazard. When the Crown Prince saw this banquet, his expression turned gloomy, but the seventh prince was tranquil. Yu Baotian pretended not to notice, respectfully serving the Crown Prince cold and hard steamed buns and a few sakai, saying, due to the rampaging flood obstructing the roads, the rations in this town are exhausted. This minister really couldn't find good wine to accompany your Highness's meal. This minister begs your Highness' forgiveness. Due to quitting Hanshi-san, the Crown Prince had long given up heavy drinking, but in the eyes of the world he was still the formal, licentious heir who only found joy in wine. Yu Baotian was an upright and plain-spoken man. He was quite critical of the Crown Prince's wanton and unrestrained behavior, so he'd presented several memorials to the Emperor, requesting abolishment of this Crown Prince. He could be considered a thorn in the Crown Prince's side. The two men disliked each other and confronted each other in secret upon arrival. The Crown Prince was expressionless, but his eyes exposed a threat of hostility. The seventh prince was silent, waiting for the Crown Prince to launch an attack. Yu Baotian was a first-class, talented official in Dazhou. He was also the Tianqian Emperor's confidant, of great importance to this disaster's relief. If the Crown Prince punished the most capable assistant as soon as they arrived, this assignment would truly be ruined. This would give him a chance to come out ahead. The Crown Prince slapped down his chopstick and was preparing to speak when a warm and delicate palm held his hand under the table. His mind slightly stumbled, but his face didn't leak his thoughts, merely glancing quickly at Zhu Yunsheng sitting beside him. After 3 years, the youth was just over 20 years old. His facial features had opened up and looked more and more like precious jade, incomparably beautiful, with a pair of sparkling eyes that were quietly casting over a calming look. This look caused the Crown Prince's heart to tremble and also feel an unbearable itchiness. The Crown Prince turned over his hand to return his hold and gently squeezed, slowly saying, "Official Yu is not stationed in Beijing, so he surely doesn't know that I have been sober for several years. Now the people are suffering, and I feel their pain. Even if I hadn't quit alcohol, I would still feel as if a fishbone was stuck in my throat and wouldn't be able to taste my food. I can still eat a few cold steamed buns, but don't you know that the common people have long reached the point of starvation? Put away this banquet. First let us distribute the rations I brought to each and every county. Aiding the people is like putting out a fire. It can't be delayed." Yu Baotian was stunned. He couldn't believe that these words were coming from the extravagant Crown Prince's mouth. The seventh prince was also stunned, staring at his older brother While the two stared foolishly, the crown prince picked up 2 steamed buns, handed one to Zhou Yunsheng, and ate the other while hastily leaving. 7. Once out of the 2 men's line of sight, the crown prince took Zhou Yunsheng's hand, his expression gentle. Why were you worried I'd lose my temper just now? It was this small minister's misunderstanding. Your Highness is wise and brilliant. How could you speak carelessly? This small official really can't assist Your Highness. The small official is ashamed. Zhou Yunsheng was not flattering him. After the crown prince's mind was reinstated to soberness, his clever and ruthless methods also returned. Without any man's reminder, he would be able to steadily sit on a throne. This often made Zhou Yunsheng feel like he was redundant. Many times Zhou Yunsheng suspected that the muddle-headed crown prince, who was manipulated into losing his status as heir for 2 lifetimes, and this man before him were 2 different people. The crown prince smiled brightly, squeezing the youth's fingers. He said in a low voice, Yunsheng's presence is my greatest assistance. If there was no Yunsheng, today's me would not be here. Here he paused a little, then intimately caressed the young man's cheek, his voice lowering even more. Every day I'm grateful that heaven sent you to my side. When you worry about me, I'm very happy. Extremely happy. Zhou Yunsheng dropped his head, afraid to speak. The era was different, his identity was different. The way he handled his emotions should also be different. Although this man often gave him a familiar throbbing, he wouldn't hastily take that step. Shen Yibin's wish was for the Shen family to prosper, for his family to live in peace and joy. If he made the wrong move, these wishes should have originally been achieved. Would come to nothing. The crown prince saw that he was refusing to respond, and originally wanted to say something, but then he heard footsteps approaching from behind, and had no choice but to drop the subject. Yu Baotian thought that the crown prince was merely putting on an act and wouldn't be able to resist for a few days. How could he expect that the crown prince would leave to survey the dangerous circumstances of the dam every day, personally go to the disaster area to appease the people, and labor night after night to examine and approve the account books submitted by each county? Gradually, he allowed the starving and scattered people of Liangjiang to regain vitality. He thought about the common people's thoughts, suffered the common people's suffering, was anxious about the common people's concerns. He didn't pay attention to enjoyment, striving for good governance, constantly working. In a brief few months, he'd actually thinned down to a skeleton. Yu Baotian took this all in and was moved. His attitude when dealing with the crown prince was no longer as extreme as before. Every 3 days he sent a report to Beijing, describing all of the crown prince's deeds, his words hinting at his wholehearted acceptance and extreme reverence, causing the Tianjin emperor to be very pleased. The crown prince was so capable, increasingly setting off the 7th prince's mediocrity. The 7th prince was anxious, inevitably using some tricks. One day, the governor of Liangjiang, Wang Bin, hosted a banquet in his official residence to entertain the crown prince. Wang Bin was the crown prince's subordinate. His daughter was a concubine in his East Palace, and she was quite favored. Therefore, his relationship with the crown prince could be considered very close. This Wang Bin played a great part in the crown prince's loss of power in the first lifetime. The crown prince of the first lifetime didn't suffer from Han Shisan poison, but the scheming from others was no less toxic. The crown prince had a smooth life, aloof and remote. After a long time, he inevitably became more and more conceited, and his supervision of his subordinates was also weak. No matter how powerful the person, with a group of pig teammates dragging them down, they could be easily defeated. And Wan Bing was the leader of the pig teammates. He was very greedy. After 7 or 8 years of seizing the funds distributed by the court for the purpose of reinforcing the dam, Liang Jiang's dam was fragile like cardboard. One poke could break it. When the crown prince was ordered to come down for disaster relief, he was afraid that the crown prince would examine this matter, so he intercepted 80% of the disaster relief money and offered it as tribute to the crown prince, and also sent 2 beauties to bewitch the crown prince. While the crown prince and the beauties were rolling in the hay, a heavy rain poured outside. It burst open the highest point of Yangjiang's dam, resulting in a surging flood that engulfed countless towns and people. Its power could be described as an immeasurable catastrophe. The crown prince was rescued from the official residence with his trousers missing, extremely nauseating. When the news returned to the capital, the Tianjin emperor was obviously furious, and the crown prince was naturally abolished. The second lifetime's crown prince was poisoned by Xiaoyudu's Hanshi son. The crown prince's methods were even more muddle-headed. Forget about 2 establishments and 2 abolishments. He was directly judged beyond redemption. After the crown prince's miserable death, not only did he not receive a posthumous name and title, he couldn't even enter the imperial tomb. His outcome was very depressing. But Zhu Yunsheng was here. The situation was greatly different in this world. The crown prince had experienced the devastation of Hanshi's son and became wiser and more tolerant. A strong sense of crisis made him unable to relax, so his supervision over his subordinates was very strict. As early as 3 years ago, he'd noticed Wang Bin's movements and had ordered him to return the stolen silver and reinforce the dam every year. So this time, even if it rained fiercely for 10 days straight, the upper dam was impregnable. Far away in the capital, Xiaoyudu was unaware of the crown prince's private actions and was quietly looking forward to the arrival of the catastrophe. Putting it another way, the crown prince's current discernment and impeccability, it really was thanks to Xiaoyudu's blessing. Wang Bin, although he was not as muddled as in the first lifetime, it was difficult to change a bootlicking nature. So, as soon as the crown prince had leisure time, he set up a banquet to tighten their relationship. His daughter started losing favor 3 years ago. How could he not worry? Wang Bin was a provincial-level official. The crown prince still had to give him some face, so he not only came on time for the banquet, he also gave him some praise. Fortunately, Wang Bin was also knowledgeable. The banquet was not overly luxurious. There were only a few homemade dishes, but the women sitting at the table were thorns severely stabbing into the crown prince's eyes. These women were too beautiful. Excellent figures, glittering eyes, graceful and elegant bearing. Not a thing was unpleasant to the eyes. Being served like this was not something normal, but 2 were also sent to accompany Shen Yibin, sitting on his left and right. They even casted amorous glances and ambiguously teased him. What was this? The crown prince endured until he saw one of the women actually smile tenderly and fall into Shen Yibin's arms. The backlog of anger finally broke out. He overturned the banquet and pulled the young boy away, storming off in a huff, only leaving behind the vermilion gates, wine and food go to waste, while people are freezing to death by the roadside. Wang Bin went pale with fright. After Yu Baotian heard the story, he clapped and laughed heartily, praising the crown prince's wisdom. calling him the country's big fortune, and so on. The matter was also reported in a memorial to the Tianjin Emperor. After reading it, the Tianjin Emperor was exceedingly pleased. After the crown prince pulled the young man into the carriage, he still couldn't calm down his anger. His chest undilated, like a beast was struggling to break free. "Your Highness, you can't be too excited. Your body will be unable to bear it." Zhu Yunsheng sighed, fishing out a pill and holding it up to the crown prince's mouth. The crown prince's eyes were very dark and very bright, heavy love stirring in his pupils. He stared at the young man, then opened his mouth, taking the pill along with the youth's fingers into his mouth, his tongue teasing. Zhu Yunsheng immediately retrieved his fingers, hung his head, and remained silent. The crown prince clenched his hands into fists. He wanted to pull him into his arms and grope him, wanted to tear off his humble robes and violate him, wanted to pry open his mouth and suck in his bodily fluids along with his soul. But he could only think about these things. He knew that he'd lived a terrible life for these few years. If he let this young man carry the stigma of a crafty and fawning official, his career would be destroyed. The only thing he could do for now was ascend the throne. Once he climbed into the supreme throne, he could protect the youth under his wings and clear all obstacles for him. Thinking up to here, great sadness and heaviness plagued his heart. The crown prince sighed faintly, then stroked the young man's cheeks before slumping back into his seat. Zhu Yunsheng's heart was stabbed by a thorn. The intense pain made his brows wrinkle. When the crown prince left Liangjiang, thousands of citizens lined the street to see him off. Some people kowtowed, some tore open their garments. The scene was very moving. In addition to people from each prefecture, each county gathered under parasols to send him off. After spreading out, they seemed to hide the sky and cover the earth. The heir, the crown prince, had finally won the recognition of the people. The seventh prince had waited for the crown prince to take in a few prostitutes, adding a few blemishes to his performance on this assignment. But he didn't expect the crown prince to angrily rebuke Wang Bin and make his popularity as heir rise to a new level. The seventh prince couldn't seize a bit of fault, so he had no choice but to lay down the flag. Far away in the capital, Xie Yudo learned that the dam was actually safe and sound, and the crown prince was wise and revered. Her inner panic was simply too difficult to describe. This life, her ultimate goal was to be Empress Dowager, the most respectable woman in Dazhou. If the seventh prince didn't ascend the throne, what was the point of her rebirth? At least in the last life, she'd climbed to the second-ranked imperial concubine prostitute position. In this life, she was only a prince's concubine. It was inferior to even the first life, not to mention her enemy Shen Qiaodan was alive and living in prosperity. Whenever she thought about possible future misfortunes, Xie Yudo couldn't sleep soundly. Fortunately, she knew that there was one more great opportunity to get rid of the crown prince and finally calm down. Because the crown prince had weakened his health from overworking, the convoy moved very slowly. But they were not even out of Yang's border. The seventh prince suddenly fell ill. Not long after, the crown prince also fell unconscious. This is a plague. We must put them into quarantine." The imperial physician felt their pulse, then shouted in alarm. The imperial guards quickly requisitioned a local noble's courtyard and carried the two princes in. Then they rode to Beijing to report on this matter. Then the Tianjin emperor was greatly alarmed, immediately dispatching several imperial physicians to rush non-stop to Liangjiang, carrying carriages full of precious medicinal ingredients. The Crown Prince and the seventh Prince's palaces each sent a concubine to wait upon them in their sick beds. In her first lifetime, the seventh Prince was also infected with the plague, and Chen Xiaodan was sent to take care of him. Thus, her friendship with the seventh Prince deepened. In this lifetime, Xie Yudo had long been preparing to wait upon the sick prince, and Chen Xiaodan had already lost interest in the seventh prince, so she naturally didn't fight for the opportunity. The crown prince's body had been hollowed out by Han Chi's son, so the plague was extra menacing. The disease had barely flared up, and the patient was already at death's door. The seventh prince was fated to have this calamity, and he'd contracted the disease earlier than the crown prince, so his situation was also not optimistic. Zhou Yinsheng took care of the unconscious crown prince every day, but when concubine Wang Xi arrived, he had no choice but to withdraw to his room. He had barely stepped out when the crown prince woke up. He saw the figure at the foot of his bed, and disappointment flashed through his eyes. He whispered, "Where is Yun Cheng?" Wang Xi used a handkerchief to cover her nose and mouth, cautiously asking, "Who is Yun Cheng?" The crown prince's personal attendant answered on her behalf, "Reporting to your highness, official Shen took care of you day and night for 4 days. He only retired when the lady concubine arrived." The crown prince's disappointment disappeared. He smiled slightly. He pointed to Wang Xi and said, "I don't want her. Call Yun Sheng back." This was also what Wang Xi wanted. She quickly followed the servant out. Chapter 8. Zhou Yunsheng's soul was powerful, not to mention 4 days without sleep. Even 4 months without sleep was possible for him. So after he returned to his room, he didn't rush to sleep. Instead, he stood at his window to meditate. He was waiting for Xie Yudu's medical space and spiritual spring. As long as Xie Yudu came, he would be able to ensure the crown prince's safe recovery. Would Xie Yudu come? The answer was certainly yes. Thinking of this, he narrowed his eyes and smiled. "Official Shen, His Highness the Crown Prince summons you." The personal servant thought that he was too worried about the Crown Prince to fall asleep, so he inevitably felt grateful. Hearing this, Zhou Yunsheng immediately headed towards the main room. "Your Highness," he slowly walked to the bedside, bowing in a salute. "Even at this time, you call me Your Highness? Call me Xinyan." The crown prince tried to raise his upper body, wanting to get a good look at the boy's face. Zhou Yunsheng quickly helped him up, patting his back with a soft pillow, then obediently called him Xinyan. This name seemed to instantly shorten the distance between the two, resulting in their faces softening. The crown prince laughed softly. Gripping his hand, he called out, "Yun Cheng," then repeated it over and over, as if there was no afterlife if he missed this time. "You said, if I have an accident, you would accompany me to the Yellow Springs. Do those words still count?" He finally regretted. What paving the way and clearing obstacles? Those were all lies he'd forced himself to believe. He was selfish even when heading to the underworld. He wanted to drag this man down with him. If Zhou Yunsheng was afraid of anything, it was not death. Even if the task in this world was not completed, he could go to the next world, then another world. No big loss. He pondered for a moment, then smiled and nodded. "Remember, those words will always count." The crown prince's eyes brightened slightly while coughing and laughing. His laughter held unprecedented joy. The palace maids and attendants had red eyes. They turned around to wipe their tears. Afterwards, Zhou Yunsheng stayed close to take care of the crown prince. He ate and drank and slept by him, not the slightest bit afraid of infection. He said that he was willing to go to the Yellow Springs with the Crown Prince, but he knew that his body was transformed. Unless he took the initiative to leave, he could live for a long time. Plus, the Crown Prince would not be killed by this plague. Xiaoyudo finally arrived at the mansion. She heard that the Crown Prince was at death's door and let out a big sigh of relief, sneering inwardly. So what if you escaped the fate of abolishment? Heaven has destined you to never ascend the throne, and you will face retribution here. If not for that rich and honorable life, you would not have struggled on your deathbed. She now towed once to the Crown Prince's courtyard, then urgently went to take care of the seventh prince. The seventh prince was very touched when he saw her brave death to help him. He took her hand and held on for a long time. Xiaoyudo whispered some comfort. Then she put a drop of the spiritual spring in all of the seventh prince's decoctions, teas, and meals. She also brought out some lotus seeds grown in the spiritual spring, peeled, and gave them to the seventh prince to eat. In order to prevent the loyal servants who came with her from getting infected with the plague, she even generously dropped some spiritual spring into the big pot of tea the servants drank from. The effectiveness of the spiritual spring was extraordinary. The seventh prince rehabilitated within a day, and the servants within his courtyard also weren't infected. On the other hand, in the Crown Prince's courtyard, a corpse was carried out almost every day, and the Crown Prince himself was unconscious more than he was awake. His end was near. Because the medicine given to the two was the same, the imperial physicians were not suspicious. They thought that this was a result of the Crown Prince having a weaker body than the seventh prince. One day, Zhou Yunsheng took care of the Crown Prince until he fell asleep, then freed himself from his unyielding grip on his clothes, and slowly walked towards the seventh prince's courtyard. Lady Concubine, please also save His Highness the Crown Prince. After paying respect to the sickly seventh prince, he rushed towards Xiaoyudo, who was standing to the side, and bowed down deeply. The imperial physicians were in the room for a checkup. When they saw this scene, they were astonished. Xiaoyudo's heart was greatly alarmed, but her face didn't reveal anything, asking uncertainly, "Official Shen, what do you mean? This concubine doesn't possess medical knowledge. How can this concubine have a way to treat His Highness the Crown Prince?" Lady Concubine is very modest. His Highness the Seventh Prince was able to recover to this point because he was blessed with the lady's panacea. His Highness the Crown Prince is the country's heir. The lady clearly has the medicine, but keeps it a secret, choosing to watch His Highness die of illness. What is the difference between this deed and treason? Zhou Yunsheng was smiling, but his words were blade-like, almost slicing Xiaoyudo's mind open. Official Shen is joking. Where does this concubine have this panacea? The luggage this concubine brought is all here, and coincidentally, all the imperial physicians are also here. You are all free to search. If you find this legendary panacea, this concubine is willing to face the highest punishment. Treason is a great crime, worthy of executing an entire family line. Official Shen, if there is no evidence, please don't make irresponsible remarks. Xiaoyudo relied on the space at hand, quickly restoring her calm. Zhou Yunsheng smiled gently. If there was no absolute certainty, this Shen would never be so rude to the lady. To be quite honest, this Shen's nose is different from ordinary people. This Shen can sniff out what ordinary people can't. If the lady wants proof, this Shen will give a demonstration. He pointed to the spice bag hanging on Xiaoru's waist and said, "This bag contains the roots of Da Hurian, Angelica, Sichuan lovage rhizome, Pharmagrides japonica grass, and 5 portions of muskroot. Also add the rhizomes of aromatic ginger, Ningxiang grass, fragrant euphorbium, and 2 portions of mugwort leaf. Of course, these are the most commonly used medicinal herbs in spice bags. The lady could claim that this Shen is only blindly guessing. But this sachet still has secrets, containing a chunk of ginseng and some lotus seeds separately. The fragrance of the ginseng is very unique, unexpectedly. This Shen has never smelled it in his entire life. This Shen boldly guesses that it is the legendary extinct purple ginseng. And those lotus seeds are even more mystical. Only the aftertaste of one small sniff can make this Shen hopelessly intoxicated. This Shen is proficient in medicine and has read all the books, but this Shen actually can't make the slightest guess about the origin of this strain. After he finished talking, he slowly walked to the table and brought the 7th Prince's medicine bowl up to his nose, sniffed, then smiled and said, "This bowl of medicine contains the scent of that ginseng and lotus seed. Moreover, there is a clear and cold liquid fragrance, and seems to be full of spirituality." He put down the bowl, then looked at a casual, laced fruit basket that contained unstriped lotus seed heads. His eyes brightened slightly, and he sighed. Such extraordinary lotus seeds. But Lady Concubine unexpectedly has this much. The lady really must possess supernatural powers. He walked a lap around the room, then halted by the window and nodded to a gurgling teapot on a small stove, which was emitting white vapor. His voice changed from gentle to cold and sharp. "Even the servant's tea can have the panacea, but you're not willing to give a little charity to His Highness? Lady Concubine, what are your intentions?" Xiaoyu secretly clenched her fists, cold sweating. She would have never expected that her medical space and spiritual spring would actually be exposed because of a dog nose. At this moment, she had already lost her mind in agitation, but she still strongly argued back. "So many imperial physicians are here, but only official Shen smell anything odd. Official Shen's ability to improvise nonsense has really broadened this concubine's horizons. This concubine says that there is no panacea. You guys may search high and low through all this luggage. If you find the slightest suspicious thing, this concubine will plead guilty." The 7th Prince recovered from his surprise and said in a heavy voice, "Go ahead and search." He and Xiaoyu had ample tactic understanding. Seeing Xiaoyu's confident expression, he also didn't panic. Zhu Yunsheng seemed to have heard a big joke. He clapped and laughed. "Why should I search your luggage? I only need to bring back this bowl of medicine, fruit basket, teapot, and sachet. Lady Concubine, this Shen has been rude. If the Crown Prince is sound, this Shen will certainly come to apologize. If the Crown Prince passes away, this Shen will accompany him to the Yellow Springs. So this Shen will be unable to come back. This Shen will take his leave now. Please have a good rest, 7th Prince and Lady." He bowed in a salute, then bluntly tore away Xiaoyu's spice bag. After straightening up, he ordered for the dishes, fruit basket, teapot, and other objects to be carried out, then called the imperial physicians and grandiosely walked away. The medical space and spiritual spring were sole objects, and they existed in an invisible dimension. Even Xiaoyu couldn't believe her eyes at first. How could she predict that they would one day be seen through? So, when the group was out of sight, she immediately went limp like clay. Facing the 7th Prince's strange, inscrutable gaze, she only saw darkness in her future. When Zhou Yunsheng returned to the courtyard, the Crown Prince had not awakened. The imperial physicians followed closely behind him, inquiring doubtfully, Infection from the plague is almost a guaranteed death. Can these things really save His Highness the Crown Prince? Official Shen, are you not mistaken? You'll know whether or not I'm mistaken after it's used. Zhou Yuncheng opened his spice bag, taking out a slice of ginseng and a lotus seed. Throwing them into the medicine bowl, he ordered for all the lotus seed heads to be peeled and placed on the tea tray for later use. Then he propped up the crown prince and gently called out, Yuncheng, I seem to be at death's door. Bring me a writing brush and inkstone. I want to write a letter to Imperial Father. You can rest assured, even after I die, I'll guarantee the Shan family's prosperity for 100 years. The Crown Prince said weakly, Your Highness will be healed today. Zhu Yunsheng neatly combed his messy hair, then brought the medicine bowl to his mouth, saying in a low voice, This is the panacea Xi brought. Drink it, and you will be healed right away. The Crown Prince thought that he was deceiving him, but he still smiled and obediently drank the medicine. Then he forced down the desire to vomit and chewed the lotus seeds. Finally, he used the tea to wash down the medicine. The imperial physicians stared wide-eyed, but they didn't seem as confident as official Shen. They each thought, This plague is terminal. How can a bowl of medicine, a few cups of tea, and lotus seeds cure it? Official Shen is so worried about the Crown Prince that he had gone mad. Just now he offended the 7th Prince and his favorite concubine. If the 7th Prince ascends the throne someday, the Shen family will be in trouble. However, a miracle appeared. After the Crown Prince ate the medicine, he actually started sweating profusely, and the sweat was black, carrying a thick, foul odor. It was as if all the toxin in his body were being expelled. Afterwards, the Crown Prince repeatedly used the toilet, and after taking a hot bath, his face was already rosy and his eyes were shiny, his body full of vitality. The result was very obvious, but it was not surprising. Forget about the spiritual spring and purple ginseng. Just the 9th grade golden lotus had extraordinary medicinal power. The 7th prince was given small amounts under Xiu Yuro's moderation, only allowed to eat 1 grain a day, so it looked like he slowly recovered. It couldn't compare to the Crown Prince, who had chewed dozens of grains in succession. The 9th grade golden lotus bloomed in the spiritual spring. The seeds absorbed the spiritual spring water until it was full and plump. Its effectiveness was obvious. Also, Xiu was rather careless, unexpectedly taking out about 5 or 6 lotus seed heads. This allowed Zhou Yunsheng to fulfill his wish of washing the marrow and boosting the meridian channels of the Crown Prince. Help me check my pulse. The Crown Prince placed his wrist on a pillow, his wet hair hanging loose, his voice full of strength. The imperial physician took turns inspecting. His strong pulse caused all their jaws to drop. Wang Shi heard the news and hurried over. She was now holding a towel, wanting to dry the Crown Prince's hair. You don't need to appear in front of me anymore, you craven and cowardly thing. The Crown Prince narrowed his eyes, the chill in his voice overflowing. Then he looked to the young man standing respectfully at his side, his smile like a spring blossom. Come, Yunsheng, my hair is dripping water. It's quite cold. This spoiled tone caused Zhou Yunsheng to be covered with goosebumps. He had no choice but to slowly walk over to wait upon him. Wang Shi's face paled. She tried to weep, but was unable to produce tears. After the imperial physicians were all finished examining his pulse, they exclaimed, His Highness is already healed. Xiexi's medicine is indeed miraculous. From the respectful lady concubine to the disrespectful Xiexi, this was a precursor to Xiu Yudo's miserable future. She obviously had medicine, but refused to use it on the Crown Prince. When this matter was passed on to the Tianqian Emperor, not only would Xie suffer a calamity, perhaps even the seventh prince would be disgraced. The crown prince was Dazhou's heir. This couple just looked on as he almost died. This was the great crime of regicide. Chapter 9. The seventh prince said in his heart, "The plague was incurable. Even he narrowly escaped from death's door. How could a bowl of medicine cure it? That Chen Yibin was just speaking nonsense. So the seventh prince quickly dispelled the doubts in his heart and pulled Xie in to comfort her. Xie dropped into his embrace, her face pale, teeth trembling. Before long, the Tianqian emperor dispatched his chief eunuch, who arrived with a group of imperial guards. He gloomily opened. His Highness the Crown Prince has already been completely healed. Lady Concubine, please take a walk with this sage. This sage has some questions to ask." The Tianqian Emperor was old. His health was progressively declining. He was naturally looking for a longevity god medicine. The attendants that followed him also wanted everlasting riches and honor. They were naturally also anxious on this behalf. So the Crown Prince didn't even need to command it before someone came to capture Xie Yudo. Xie Yudo knew that her space and spiritual spring were too miraculous. She couldn't let others know about it, otherwise the outcome would be fatal, and the space was already bound to her soul, with a jadeite bracelet and as a medium. As long as she didn't wish it, even if she wore the bracelet on her wrist, no one could see it. This bracelet couldn't be robbed. As long as she had the spiritual spring and space, she always had a way to survive this calamity. Because of this assurance, no matter how the chief eunuch interrogated her, Xie was not willing to confess. The emperor had not yet sent down directions, and the group was not brave enough to carry out punishment on a prince's concubine. So the chief eunuch was helpless and had no choice but to leave angrily with the imperial guards. Soon after they left, Xie quickly swallowed a rejuvenation pill, then finally slumped into the corner, panting. She could hide in her space, but when she came out, she would still be stuck in the prison cell. So what was the use? Moreover, her family was still in the capital. Her younger brother also had great future prospects. If she ignored them and disappeared, the emperor would certainly take out his anger on the Xie family. So her only choice was to offer the longevity prescription to the Tianqian emperor to help nurse the Tianqian emperor's health, making the Tianqian emperor eternally grateful to her. This could still be considered a shortcut to promotion. The seventh prince would also benefit a lot. Thinking up to here, Xie smiled slightly. Her previous panic and helplessness were swept away. If she could think of it, how could Zhou Yunsheng not? That night, he hypnotized the imperial guards and boldly walked into the prison. "Lady Concubine, how are you feeling?" He smiled and cupped his hands, his eyes full of banter. Then he sniffed the air and sighed. "The lady always has so many remarkable medicines on her body, and this medicine is very peculiar. Based on the scent, the Shen fears that a few of these medicinal ingredients can't be found in all of Dazhou. If the lady offers this as a tribute to the emperor, and the emperor lives for 100 years, the lady will certainly experience a change in fortune." Xie sneered, but remained silent. She was now somewhat fearful of this champion scholar. She felt that he was not mortal. How could a mortal man break into her space and spiritual spring with just a glance? Zhou Shang didn't mind. He walked up to the prison door, picked up a random straw on the ground, and inserted it into the brass lock. After a little fiddling, the big lock opened. As the villain, there really was no disadvantage to having many skills. except for giving birth. There was nothing he couldn't do. Xieyuro gawked at him. After she snapped out of it, she huddled herself into the corner, shouting in panic, "What are you doing?" "Relax, I won't kill you." Zhu Yunsheng walked over, bending to look at her. If he killed the world's hero or heroine, the world would immediately collapse. Because he was a foreign force, there was devastating might. But if a resident of the world killed a hero or heroine, except for skewering the world of its original track, there wouldn't be any other effects. So he wouldn't take the initiative to deal with the hero and heroine. He was after the space and spiritual spring. As a mass of energy, the space and spiritual spring was food. Hearing this remark, Xieyudo became even more alert. The hands wrapped around her shoulders were rigid, wanting to shout, but finding that she was unable to make a sound. What was going on? She looked at Zhou Yunsheng in indescribable horror. "Just a bit of hypnosis. Don't panic." Zhou Yunsheng's smile was gentle. Pointing to her slender wrist, he sighed. "An imperial green jadeite bracelet. Really rare. You can see it?" Seyudo could still speak at normal volume. She was now almost scared enough to lose her soul, constantly guessing this man's identity. The bracelet was an immortal's gift. If Zhu Yunsheng could see it, wasn't he also an immortal? Zhu Yunsheng didn't answer. He reached over and pulled the bracelet off, then rolled it around in his palm. Xiudo stared in endless horror as the bracelet turned into little fluorescent lights, all absorbed into Zhou Yunsheng's body. Although it's nothing compared to the absorbing a whole world, mosquito meat is still meat. So thanks a lot, Lady Concubine. Zhou Yunsheng elegantly cupped his hands, then strolled out of the cell. In the end, he didn't forget to rehang the copper lock. Putting a finger on his lips, he said in a low voice, "As long as the spiritual spring in space is taboo, let it not be mentioned before others." This was the last hypnotism. Xieyuro maintained her horrified expression, but obediently nodded. Because the bracelet was bound to her soul, forcefully taking it away would also injure her mind. Soon after Zhou Yunsheng left, Xieyuro felt a terrible headache and she rolled on the ground in pain. "Where did you go?" When Zhou Yunsheng returned to the room, the crown prince was leaning against the bed head, staring at him. "To the bathroom." "Is there not a closed stool in the house?" "The smell is unpleasant, and the sound is also indecent." The crown prince chuckled, then opened the quilt and said, "You're such a busybody. Come in already." Zhu Yunsheng hesitated for a few seconds before removing his robes and getting into the bed. This half a month, while the crown prince was critically ill, he slept in his bed every day. Refusing now was somewhat unnatural. The crown prince embraced him. His strength was strangely great. Without another word, they slept peacefully. Xieyudo was insane, not responding to any questions. The chief eunuch had no choice but to escort her back to the capital, to be personally interrogated by the Tianqian emperor. A god medicine that could almost instantly cure the plague. The Tianqian emperor naturally wanted to obtain it, personally going to the office of punishment to oversee. Xieyuro looked deranged, shouting that the crown prince would be abolished, the seventh prince would ascend the throne, she would be empress, and so on. Her ambition was abundantly clear. The Tianqian emperor was furious, inevitably thinking that if this small concubine could be so ambitious, what were the seven prince's thoughts? Perhaps he desperately wanted him and the crown prince to die, clearing the path for him. Otherwise, how could he know that Xie had god medicine, but refused to use it on the crown prince? In this way, the seventh prince fell into an extremely unlucky situation. The Tiantian emperor imprisoned him in his residence and snatched away all his assignments. Xiaqi's family also met with misfortune. The Tiantian emperor's imperial guards completely turned over their properties in search and imprisoned the entire family for treason and other felonies. Xie Yudo's conduct was not at all cautious. She indiscriminately arranged medical prescription and other objects from her space on her shelves, really allowing the Tiantian emperor to seize a bounty. But many of the medicinal ingredients could only grow in a space. Where could they be found in the mortal world? The Tiantian emperor handed over the receipts to the imperial physicians for research. After no results were found, he handed them to several wandering Taoist priests. Over time, he unexpectedly became obsessed with concocting pills of immortality and went down the path of pursuit of longevity. The crown prince frequently advised him to stop, but he was ignored, so he had no choice but to drop the subject. Slowly, he began taking over governmental affairs. When the Tiantian emperor was 56 years old, he collapsed, and the whole country mourned his passing. The crown prince sat on the supreme throne with almost universal support from the officials. After the grand crowning ceremony, the newly appointed Tianqi emperor impatiently summoned the newly appointed Grand Academician. "Am I wise or not wise today?" The emperor intimately gripped the young man's hand. "Wise." Zhou Yunsheng struggled to get free, seeing his strength getting increasingly bigger, almost crushing his hand bones. He had no choice but to give up. Imposing or not? Imposing. The corner of Zhou Yunsheng's mouth twitched. "Then are you still fond of me?" Zhou Yunsheng was silent. Seeing the storm brewing in the other man's dark eyes, he'd considered for a moment, then said, "You are now the emperor. I am a court counselor. If our relationships exceeds the boundaries of monarch and minister, forget about whether or not other people notice. Only between ourselves, suspicion and jealousy will eventually arise. Contradictions are inevitable. Our time, our love might whittle away. Over time, our love might whittle away." The Tiantian emperor automatically ignored the first few sentences, asking in delight, "Love? You also have feelings for me?" "I knew it." He pulled the young man into a tight embrace, his voice low and dangerous. "Why don't you give me a chance? Maybe our feelings will not whittle away, but refresh for an eternity. If you don't agree to be with me today, then promise 100 years of prosperity for the Shen family will not count." The promised 100 years. Zhu Yunsheng's shoulder ached under his grip. He raised his head and glared, clenching his teeth. "The emperor never goes back on his words. Haven't you heard this saying? The emperor is unpredictable. Haven't you heard this?" The Tiantian emperor retorted. Don't get angry." The Tiantian emperor saw his ugly complexion and quickly coaxed in gentle tones. "As long as you obediently stay by my side and don't disappear, I won't touch the Shen family. Yunsheng, I'm begging you, please, I'm begging." Like a child, he buried his head in the young man's neck hollow and rubbed where was that imposing momentum from during the day. Zhu Yunsheng originally held some inexplicable affection towards him. Now, seeing him so fragile and panicky, he pondered for a long time, then slowly embraced his slender and powerful waist, compromising. The Tianqi emperor rejoiced in his heart, then hurriedly took hold of his lips. Xie Yudo was sentenced to death by the Tianqian emperor, and the seventh prince also had his title rank stripped away. Now that the new emperor had ascended the throne, his rank couldn't be reinstated. The seventh prince huge residence was deserted, the income not covering the expenditures. He unexpectedly had to rely on Chen Xiaodan to maintain it. My brother has just been bestowed the title of Duke Zhongyong. Today he is hosting a banquet. Are you coming with me? Chen Xiaodan no longer showed her former humbleness in front of the seventh prince. Her address had long changed into you and I. Naturally, I will go with my beloved imperial concubine. The seventh prince's smile was extremely gentle. Now that you have lost your rank, you can't call me beloved imperial concubine. Lest others find fault, Chen Xiaodan retorted, not lightly or heavily. She left without looking at the seventh prince's drastic change in complexion. The two arrived at the Shen residence, only to see the guests coming and going. The entrance as busy as a marketplace. The scene was very grand. The whole world knew of the Tianqi Emperor's extreme trust in official Shen. In front of the Emperor, 100 sentences from others was not equal to a single light comment from him. Naturally, everyone wanted to curry favor with him. Shen Qidan left behind the seventh prince, who was wholeheartedly trying to make friends with the courtiers, to stroll through the back garden. But he met a row of majestic imperial guards stationed at the courtyard gate. Whenever someone came near, they would look over menacingly. Shen Qidan was frightened. She stood on tiptoe, trying to get a look inside. But there she saw her younger brother and the Tianqi Emperor drinking wine by the lotus pond. She couldn't hear what her brother said, but the Tianqi Emperor raised his wine cup and laughed heartily. While laughing, he reached out and combed his hand through her brother's wind-tossed hair, his expression very gentle. The monarch and minister had already gotten along for nearly a decade, but their feelings seemed to never change. Shen Xiaodan felt reassured. She smiled faintly and turned away.